Number 10. Earth 3. The post-Flashpoint Earth 3 is similar to its pre-Flashpoint Earth, but way better. This Earth is the birthplace of evil. The mentality here isn't good versus evil, it's more like just evil. Strength is respected more than anything else, with the weak basically being annihilated. Instead of the Justice League, Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate of America, whose members include Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, Power Ring, Johnny Quick, Sea King, The Outsider, Grid, and John Johns. Earth 3 was reintroduced in 2013 and has played a part in Darkseid War in 2015, Dark Knight's Death Metal in 2020, and in 2021 it was reborn again in the Infinite Frontier story. Like I said, when we started, the DC universe is complicated, but what's remained the same since 2013 is that some of the coolest stories come out of Earth 3. Number 9. Earth 1. Earth 1 and the number 10 pick are probably the oldest of the Earths and universes on this list. Earth 1 first appeared in 2008 in its New 52 form, but it introduced a whole spectrum of readers into the DC universe, and sales for its comics were through the roof. So I believe it deserves a spot on the list. Here, superheroes are all younger, and they all just started their superhero careers. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Teen Titans, and Green Lantern all have graphic novels that take place on this Earth, and they are all just fresher takes on the almost overdone superhero origin stories. With the characters all being younger, it was also very easy for younger readers to relate to, and gave the characters conflicts that they wouldn't have faced as their prime Earth counterparts. Number 8. Injustice Universe. The Injustice Universe of Earth 22 is the universe in which the events of the Injustice video game and its related comics take place, and it first popped up in 2013. So here in the Injustice world, Superman went a little bonkers. After the Joker tricked Supes into killing both Lois Lane and her unborn child, plus unintentionally blowing up Metropolis, Superman murdered the Joker and eventually became a tyrannical ruler of Earth. The Batman of Injustice creates an insurgency, eventually enlisting the aid of another Earth, Earth 1 of this reality. With the alternate Earth's help, he overthrew Superman's regime and rebuilt the world. And that's all just part of the first game. Number 7. The 53rd World. The 53rd World, named by the smart primates who live there, was a world unknown to the rest of the multiverse. It's set in a near future where presumably the world is inhabited by super smart apes, like Planet of the Apes style. Oh, and also, immortality was achieved in 2067, meaning that yes, all these ultra smart apes are immortal. We know that there exists alternate ape versions of Superman, Batman, the Atom, and Aquaman. The existence of this Earth was first revealed in 2018's Dark Knight's Rising: The Wild Hunt, when Detective Chimp was beginning to lose his intelligence. The ape heroes show up, recruited by Raven, Cyborg, and the Flash to help with the dark multiverse, saying they were here to help. Obviously. Detective Chimp, accompanied by the apes of the 53rd Earth, plus Flash, Cyborg, and Raven, go to help Earth Zero's Justice League fight the dark multiverse forces. That's kind of all we know about the 53rd Earth. I want more super apes! Number 6. Archive of Worlds. The Archive of Worlds isn't so much an alternate Earth, it's actually an artificial multiverse which contains pocket dimensions in the form of film reels. Now that's just kinda nuts on its own, but then take into account the fact that it was created by a mad god, Artur Io, who is the god of Tales, who is jealous of the new god of Tales, which is the internet. It's pretty nuts. He tried to steal the new god's soul and was instead encased in a Wayne Tech satellite where he created the Archive of Worlds. First appearing in Batman/Superman Volume 2, number 16 in 2021, the pocket dimensions include a world where Superman never came to be, as well as one where Batman never came to be, a world based on hell, a western world, a world based on the life of Alana Strange, and so many other unnamed worlds. Auteur.io eventually was cured by Batman, and he instead became Observer.io, which is a lot nicer. Number 5. The Linear Verse. The Linear Verse is an alternate reality where the people age so slowly that it's almost safe to say they don't age at all. Batman began his career in 1939, with his youth lasting for decades instead of the normal aging of a human. In a way, this kind of represents how comic book characters seemingly never age and grow old. except in certain stories. By the late 20th century, the world had most of its superheroes. After this point though, things get a little whack. See, Earth became a dystopia ruled by the wealthy, which, I don't know, it seems a bit too real for me. And a great disaster was foreseen that actually came to pass. And the world became very similar to the one in the Earth AD story. Anthropomorphized animals had become the rulers of the planet, with humans devolving, save for Kamandi and a few others. Then, in the 25th century, humanity seemingly built a high-tech society, which saw the rise of Michael Carter, who is Booster Gold. In the 31st century, Earth became the base of the Legion of Superheroes, who were an interplanetary superhero team. This world is just a wild ride. Oh, and it first appeared in Generations Forged #1 in April of 2021. Number 4, the Metalverse. Okay, I know we're going to talk about the Dark Multiverse, but we haven't talked about, and we need to talk about, the Metalverse. So basically, after Perpetua defeated the Justice League, she gave Prime Earth to the Batman Who Laughs. He and his Dark Knights defeated all the heroes and then reshaped the Earth into his vision. Look at this super cool map! He turned Gotham City into a whole continent super city that is guarded by Joker dragons. He made his home Castle Bat, which is another version of Batman who became a sentient Gotham. There is a hell on Earth called the Hellscape, ruled by Wonder Woman. Arkham Wasteland, ruled over by Harley Quinn. A Superman-powered new Apocalypse prison where all the remaining heroes are held. Megapocalypse with a Rainbow Valley where all the lantern rings lay because no one is worthy that exists anymore. This version of Earth Prime isn't exactly an alternate universe, but it definitely sounds like it should be. Hey nerds! Just wanted to say thanks for watching. It means a lot to us. If y'all don't mind smacking that like button, it would help us out. And it helps YouTube know we don't suck. Okay, on to the top 3. Number 3. Green Lantern Legacy. Green Lantern Legacy is a one-shot comic from 2020, in which we are given an alternate Earth where the Green Lanterns of Earth were John Stewart, who we already know, and a Vietnamese woman named Kim Tran. Now, Kim Tran, like most of the Green Lanterns, was an awesome hero who never let evil escape her sight, in brightest day or blackest night. She was a pillar for her community too, helping people from all walks of life. And she even helped other Vietnamese immigrants feel at home in this new city. The comic, though, really follows Tai Pham, who is Kim Tran's grandson, as he takes up the mantle of Green Lantern from his grandmother, becoming one of the youngest Green Lanterns at 12 years old. We see him struggle with racism, bullies, his own fears, and against the Yellow Lantern. It's a great story, and it gives some well-needed Vietnamese representation to the DC landscape. Give it a read! Number 2, Deceased. You know how Marvel has the Marvel Zombie storyline? Well, this is basically DC Zombies. That's a bit of an unfair comparison though. The two stories are very different, with the DC version ultimately being slightly more grounded and emotional. In this reality, Cyborg has been captured by Darkseid on Apocalypse, and it's revealed that the anti-life equation lives inside him. When Darkseid tries to take the equation, it is instead corrupted, causing Darkseid to explode Apocalypse. But not before Cyborg was sent to Earth. Once he arrives, he inadvertently infects the entire world with the anti-life equation, which has taken the form of a techno-organic virus. This turns millions of people and a lot of metahumans into zombies. The story follows the survivors as they try to quell the threat, and eventually leave the Earth to settle a new home. I kind of prefer this to the Marvel Zombies story. I don't know, it's a survival story instead of a funny zombie story. I like it. Sue me. Please don't sue me. Number 1, Dark Multiverse. First appearing in Dark Knight's Metal #1 in 2017, the Dark Multiverse is basically the shadow version of the regular DC universe that resides underneath the primary one. So there are negative versions of the 52 Earths of the regular multiverse, but it was also originally the World Forge, meaning it has so many more worlds. For example, there are worlds born from sentient life's hopes and fears. Honestly, each world here could take up a point on this list, but it feels like that's cheating a little. The World Forger was the master of this domain and created the Great Dragon, Barbados, to destroy unstable realities that couldn't join the Orrery of Worlds. Barbados, manipulated by Perpetua, rebelled and defeated the World Forger, creating the Dark Multiverse. A lot more happens after that, but I can't cover that in a 1-minute segment, so Dark Knight's Metal is an amazing story and it deserves your reading. Number 10, Batman vs. Bigby. You know Batman, but have you ever read or heard of the Fable series? It's one of my favorite comic series. It basically follows classic fairy tale characters living in modern day New York. The Big Bad Wolf, otherwise known as Bigby Wolf, is the sheriff of their community. In 2021, we got the limited DC Black Label series Batman vs. Bigby, a wolf in Gotham, which is a collaboration between these two comic worlds, with Bigby as a main suspect for murders in Gotham. If you like the Fables world and you like Batman, you'll love this little mashup. Number 9. JSA, The Liberty Files. The Justice Society of America, The Liberty Files, is a DC Elseworlds story from 2000 to 2003, which makes it non-canonical. Any story that lets writers go outside the rules of the DC canon always makes for stories that I personally love. Alright, so what's it about? The series took characters from the JSA, but turned them into covert government operatives in World War II. Specifically, the story centered on 3 heroes: Batman, called Bat, Our Man, called Clock, and Dr. Midnight, called Owl. I know, really creative names. The 3 were known as the Unholy Three, and their mission, at least in the Part 1 story, is to find Jack the Grin, who is the Joker, who has information about the German weapon Übermensch, or Superman. Are you sold yet? Number 8. Earth 15. Earth 15 first appeared in 2007 in Countdown number 30. This Earth was basically a perfected Earth with heroes who evolved to become nearly perfect beings, with most of the proteges like Jason Todd, Donna Troy, Zod, and Kyle Rayner taking over the original heroes' roles. That is, until the events of Flashpoint, when it was destroyed by the crazed Superboy Prime. That little rascal. The still existing dimension became a graveyard universe, eventually being modified by Hal Jordan into an Earth whose heroes had personalities opposite to the Prime Earth versions. It's an interesting place for sure, and some interesting things have happened in it. Check it out. Before we go on to number 7, I got something to tell you. You're great. You guys keep hitting that like and subscribe button, you're making me blush, my goodness. Keep up that support, it helps us bust out more and more of these videos for you lovely people. Alright, moving on. Number 7. Earth 20. Earth 20, which appeared in Final Crisis Superman Beyond number 1 in 2008, is the home of Kent Nelson, otherwise known as Doc Fate. And he is so cool. Basically, he leads the Society of Superheroes on Earth 20, which is a group that includes Lady Blackhawk, Immortal Man, the Green Lantern, the Mighty Atom, and Batman from time to time. The history of this world isn't exactly very well known, but we do know it has just come out of a war that is somewhat like World War II. There are Zeppelins flying around in some cities, and the cars are all big and beautiful. It's got a very slick 20s style. The heroes of this world would do righteous battle against a society of supervillains from Earth 40 in a huge 5-year war. My goodness. Number 6. Batman White Knight. I cannot recommend this 2017 story enough to you guys. It is an insanely interesting and fantastic Joker story. It takes place in an alternate Gotham City, and the Joker regains his sanity after a brutal and violent forced ingestion of a medicine by Batman. The roles are practically reversed, as the seemingly reformed Joker, real name Jack Napier, becomes the White Knight, hoping to better Gotham City as a politician, while also condemning Batman as an unhinged violent vigilante. Which, I mean, it's kinda hard to argue against that point of view. He sued the GCPD for police brutality, and he worked against the 1%, who used Batman and Gotham's crime for their own financial benefit. Joker actually becomes a good guy. It's kind of insane. But there is more to this story, and I highly suggest you check it out. Number 5. Earth 14. Alright, this is gonna be a pretty quick one. There is not a whole heck of a lot of information out there about Earth 14, which first appeared in Superman Volume 4, number 15 in 2017. I want to talk about it because the Justice League of Assassins is just the coolest looking version of the Justice League I have ever seen, even if it was just for a short period of time. The Assassins are made up of alternate heavy weapon bearing versions of Wonder Woman, Batman, Harley Quinn, Flash, Aquaman, what looks like it could be Green Lantern, and Superman. They only last about 3 pages of the comic they are a part of, but I really hope we see them pop up in other stories because these guys are just so rad. All we saw them do was fight a bunch of gatherers in a post-apocalypse looking Earth. Number 4. Batman 89. Okay, you can fight me in the comments about this one. Batman 89 was published in 2021, but the stories take place in the Tim Burton Batman movie's world. Seeing how we haven't actually seen a comic in this world, I'm gonna take this one, okay? Cool. So yes, this is that Batman and Bruce Wayne in this comic. He has the same suit from the movie, the same amazing Batmobile, and it takes place after the events of the movies. But it's more like comic heavy. It's really, really cool. We see Harvey Dent actually become Two-Face, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is back, and we even get a Robin for this universe. It's so awesome. I don't want to spoil too much, so you can probably guess what I'm gonna say. Go give it a read. Number 3. DC vs. Vampires. The ongoing DC vs. Vampires limited series that started in 2021 is such an amazing story. It just makes sense. Pit the characters of the DC universe against a growing army of vampires? A mystery around who the superhero vampire leader is? It's great! The basic premise, without spoiling much, is that Mary, Queen of Blood, who upholds the peace between vampires and humans, is dead. Whoever killed her also killed the Legion of Doom, and has made a plan for vampires to take over the world. Andrew Bennett, a vampire, went to the Justice League to tell them about the army of vampire supervillains. There's a vampire Gorilla Grodd, like, come on. The story has a large Batman and Bat family presence, as a story about vampires should, and for a story so grim, it actually has some really funny moments. Especially from Damian Wayne, as I'm sure no one is surprised by.
At number 2 is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, a symbol of strength and justice who has been a cornerstone of the Justice League, yet her pivotal role often goes unnoticed. In 2022, her journey across the multiverse and involvement in the trial of the Amazons showcased her resilience. Stepping back from leading the Justice League Dark, she aided both the leagues against the formidable Xanadoth, and notably, her contribution in the showdown against Pyrrha and the Dark Army stuck out. Rescued by Barry Allen, she emerged in the final battle, emphasizing her unwavering commitment. Although in this series her time in the league was limited, the quality of her actions spoke volumes. Wonder Woman's return marked a turning point, spotlighting her often underrated significance in safeguarding the league and the broader universe. And at number 1 is Green Arrow. Green Arrow often finds himself lurking in the shadows of the limelight, but let's not underestimate the gravity of his contributions. So you see, 2022 was a really good year for Green Arrow. Not content with mere archery prowess, he silently bankrolled the league's operations, an unsung hero in the financial realm. When the Royal Flush Gang and Xanadoth posed threats, there he stood, bow drawn, ready for action. His devotion went beyond the battlefield. When Black Canary was summoned to the Hall of Heroes, uninvited was he, yet a resolute in companionship. Pyrrha's ominous Dark Army meets its match, and eventually Pyrrha's ominous Dark Army met its match as the battle ensued. Yet it was Green Arrow's sacrifice that tipped the scales, obliterating Pyrrha's machinery and securing triumph. It just goes to show that superhuman strength isn't always about flashy costumes and booming catchphrases, so the next time you find yourself pondering the capabilities of these unsung heroes, let's remember that sometimes it's the quieter, less celebrated members who possess astonishing abilities beyond what meets the eye. And as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the superhero world, let's always keep that sense of wonder alive, because you never know what incredible feats might be lurking just around the corner, ready to amaze us.
Number 10. Speeding Bullets. Basically a multiversal DC Elseworld story that answers the question, what if Superman didn't just have powers but was also rich? That's basically what is going on here in Speeding Bullets. In this story, Superman wasn't raised by the Kents, but instead was taken in and adopted by the Waynes, and he becomes, you guessed it, Bruce Wayne. After the death of Thomas and Martha, Bruce becomes Batman, but the difference is this version of Batman has tech, money, smarts, and superpowers. Lex also becomes a mess of a villain in this world. While still being Superman's nemesis, he's also Batman's nemesis rolled into one, with an extra little dash of Penguin, just for good measure, I guess. So here we get a villain who is Lex, Joker, and the Penguin all in one. Oh goody, just what none of us necessarily wanted or needed. And yet, we got it. This also doesn't do much to enhance his motivation for villainy, which, like his identity, is also kind of all over the place. Still, the premise behind this Elseworld story is pretty cool, but unfortunately it doesn't add enough when it comes to offering a twist or different perspective to either the Superman or Batman mantle. Number 9. Batman and Captain America. A gloriously weird and awesome comic. This DC multiversal story also happens to be a DC Marvel crossover issue featuring Batman, his sidekick sidekick Robin and Captain America and his sidekick Bucky. Both Cap and Batman end up joining together and then swapping sidekicks. Their villains also seem to have a team up as Red Skull and Joker come together, but this is also the famous issue the Joker insists that Red Skull is too evil even for him. He may be a criminal lunatic, but after all, he's an American criminal lunatic, and he can't stand by when it comes to abiding by Red Skull's history and motivations. So not only do we get to see some great team ups, but we also get to see a full out fight break out between these two iconic villains. Thanks, John Byrne. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love Elseworld stories and all of the weird, wacky things that go on in the multiverse when it comes to just alternate worlds, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up, and hey, maybe we can do some more Elseworlds lists for you. Cause yeah, there's lots of kooky stories out there. Number 8, the Superman monster. Frankenstein, but make it Superman. There are lots of retellings of classic tales when we look into the realm of Elseworlds, and the story of Frankenstein is not one that is left untouched. Actually, I feel like this story gets interpreted a few times throughout the Elseworld stories. I feel like I've seen at least 3 different versions of Frankenstein retold in Elseworlds. I still have yet to see Dr. Seuss retellings though in the world of DC, which are some classic kids tales that do eke their way surprisingly into Marvel at times. In the Superman monster, Lex Luthor takes the role of creator and Superman ends up as his monster. You might think this sounds familiar considering it's also kind of the premise for the main continuity origin story of Bizarro, but this creation, while starting out similar to Bizarro, eventually goes full-on hero and full-on Superman by the end of it. That means in this story of Frankenstein, the creator ends up the monster, while the monster ends up the hero. What a twist. Number 7, Justice Riders. Because it's an inevitability that at some point, we have to turn to the Wild West for inspiration when it comes to an Elseworld story. We've gotta go there at some point. And so we have Justice Riders. Justice Riders reimagines the DC universe as existing during the time of the Wild West and adapts the characters to kind of fit their surroundings somewhat. As such, Wonder Woman becomes a Texan-sounding sheriff, and Martian Manhunter gets to sport a poncho and a cowboy hat. Which honestly, this is one you might want to check out just for that, cause that's great. This is the Wild West, baby. There are also plenty of shootouts and bar brawls, some with cyborg enemies involved. As ridiculous as this premise is, I will say it's executed well and it also looks fantastic, so. Number 6, The Reaching Hand. Honestly, what a strange story this one is. It features Batman as an occult detective trying to solve the mystery of Elongated Man's death. Unfortunately, it seems as though Elongated Man wasn't alone in his body, and there was a force of darkness within him who continues to seek to spread gloom and doom wherever it can. This story features a lot of restless nights for Bruce as well, and unfortunately, he ends up too late to save Jimmy Olsen. Not Jimmy Olsen, who ends up brutally murdered by Swirly. At least that's what it looks like to me. He's just head down in the toilet and they're like, he's been murdered. Or he was just being mistreated by the other staff at his workplace, but no, he's dead. Death by Swirly. Bruce also is too late to save his friends or Gotham in the end, at least that's what's implied. This one ends pretty bleakly, so yeah. Also, this is back from when we had like Elseworlds, like giant sizes, so there would be like a bunch of short stories in there. Kinda like What If, and I like that style. More stories though than What If, because those are normally 2. Sometimes only 1. Number 5, Elseworld's finest, Supergirl/Batgirl. You can't go wrong with a jacked Joker when it comes to weird multiversal stories. Looking real jacked, baby! Elseworld's finest is weird but also kind of cool. It focuses on Barbara Gordon and Kara Zor-El, Batgirl and Supergirl respectively, who are guardians of Gotham and Metropolis, as in this world, there was never a Batman or a Superman. The two of them team up to take on the manipulative and traitorous Lex Luthor, and as I said, a really swole version of the Joker. It's a strange one, but it's also kind of a great one. Number 4, Batman/the Demon, a tragedy. In this Elseworld story, we get to explore a horrifying fantastical world where magic exists. Here, Bruce Wayne is not the Batman, instead suffering from an allergy to moonlight. He is a restless sleeper, and it turns out this is because he's actually bonded to the demon Etrigan. Oh my goodness. It takes Bruce a while to figure this out though, but in the end, he is too late to save his girlfriend Glenda. Poor Glenda. The best thing he can do according to Merlin is to wipe his memory, which will also mean he has no recollection of Glenda. Oh no. Merlin claims that this will save her. Unfortunately, it doesn't, as Etrigan taking over Bruce in the nighttime does end up still killing her. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, which actually seems to have been Merlin's plan all along. You see, in order to keep the demon trapped within Bruce, his forgetfulness is necessary. There is no way to save Glenda really in any case, most likely, and Merlin was just saying that to try to get Bruce to, do what he wanted him to do. But hey, at least Bruce doesn't remember her, so at least he won't be sad about it. Number 3, Brotherhood of the Bat. Have you ever wondered to yourself what the DC universe would be like if every member of the League of Assassins was dressed up and also weirdly happened to resemble Batman? No? Me neither. But too bad, because we get to know what that would be like in this Elseworld story. I mean, not even too bad, it's kind of really great in a weird way. Brotherhood of the Bat takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where Ra's al Ghul decides that the League of Assassins, they need some new costumes. New Bat-themed costumes that all very much resemble alternative takes on Batman's outfits. Also, check out some of the notes on Ra's al Ghul's design sketches here. That is honestly my favorite part of this story. Just seeing all these, like there's like little notes in red. It's like, is this cape too much? You can never have too much cape, just so you know. Just so you know, Raish, no such thing. Number 2, Polaris. Polaris is a character who I feel like often gets overshadowed by her dad, Magneto. And yet she too is just as much, or nearly as much I'd say, of a powerhouse as he is. Polaris has had somewhat of a rough go in recent years, especially when it comes to confronting her past and moving forward towards her future. I would love to see more moments like when she joined the X-Men, where she gets her moment in the spotlight. It's well deserved, and Lorna Dane deserves to not have her character sabotaged at every single turn, like has happened to her in some of her past. She's underrated on multiple levels, both as a hero and as a character with some real depth to her. I think it would be really amazing to see her team up with her now considered adoptive sister and brother as well to fight against injustice in the world. I love all the healing we've been doing with this whole family lately, and it would be so cool to continue along that path and see where else it could take us, especially if we bring the family together as a unit. I've seen it happen a little bit in the comics, but I'd love to see more of it. Number 1, Kid Omega. Poor Kid Omega's trope initially with his appearance in the Krakoan era X-Men comics involved him constantly being taken out, as in permanently defeated. But don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and has been shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42.
Coming in at number 10 is Ace the Bat Hound. Of all the Bat family pets, Alfred the Cat, Bat Cow, Titus, Ace came first, and he wasn't just another pet of Damian Wayne. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just saying. Now, Ace seems to be a name shared by many dogs who have worked with Bruce Wayne and his companions. When he first appeared in Batman number 462 in May of 1991, Ace was a shepherd type doggo, and that's been the most popular breed for Ace the Bat Hound, usually a German shepherd. But he was also a mastiff for a long while as well, with no real explanation. The most recent and popular German shepherd Ace the Bat Hound was an attack dog for the Joker and was not treated very well. Luckily, this very good boy was taken in by Alfred and the Bat family, and he became the bestest Bat boy ever. Yes, he did. Number 9, Batwoman. There have been a few different Batwomen over the years, but the one who will always stick in most fans' minds would have to be Kate Kane. Now, just to be clear, this is Batwoman we are talking about and not Batgirl. As a child of military parents, Kate has a soldier's mentality which just adds to her amazing fighting skills. She has cultivated over the years, not to mention a deep, intense desire to be the best she can be always. She received training from the Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Special Air Service, and the villain Shadow also helped to train her to become a better hero. Following Batman's disappearance after the Infinite Crisis, Kate Kane assumed the Batwoman mantle and stepped in to become Gotham's protector. Kate has even displayed some superpowers. At one point, an injury left her able to detect electromagnetic fields, and in the Future Imperfect storyline, she even became a vampire. Number 8, Bluebird. I think Bluebird, or Harper Row, is looked over quite a bit when we talk about the Bat family, and honestly, it's kind of understandable. She did actually step down from her hero mantle in order to get her electrical engineering skills accredited, which honestly, that's the most real-world reason for someone to stop being a hero. But it was probably the smart thing to do, because Harper Row here is a whiz with electronics and electrical engineering. She's used her natural aptitude to help both her and her brother survive, as well as assisting Batman multiple times without him asking, improving upon some of his tech and helping out Red Robin on a few occasions using her homemade advanced tools. She's actually very cool, in my humble opinion, in her brief time being around. Number 7, Duke Thomas. Now I feel like this might bother a few people, but honestly, this young blood still has to prove himself in my eyes. There is absolutely no doubt he is powerful. As one of the only metahumans on the Bat family roster, he's already naturally a cut above many others, but there are so many more that could bring him down without even needing superpowers. Powers don't always equal superiority on this family. Speaking of his powers though, Duke wields ghost vision, which he uses to perceive people and moments in the past and in the future. He also wields a cosmic awareness that extends into other realities and has even used the ability to travel across dimensions by light and shadow. Now he originally started as part of the We Are Robin movement, but left and ended up making it on his own. Batman then took him in, helped train him, and then sent him out to be a part of the new Outsiders team alongside Black Lightning. Number 6, Lucius Fox. There are a few people without which Bruce Wayne would not be where he is or be able to do the things that he does. Among this very select group would be Lucius Fox. First appearing in 1979, Lucius was the second in command at Wayne Enterprises. He is an incredibly adept businessman known throughout the world, but he is also, privately, Bruce Wayne's business manager, financial executive, and not to mention, armorer. And if that weren't enough, when Bruce Wayne decided to resign, Lucius was promoted to CEO of Wayne Enterprises and the Wayne Foundation. His power definitely comes from the power of the company, his connection to Bruce, his sons, Luke and Jace, who is not a member of the Bat family, surprisingly, and he also does have a military background, so there is that if he's ever in like a little scuffle. It turns out that in DC, power isn't only about how big your muscles are. Number 5, Batwing. Luke Fox is not the first Batwing, but for a lot of us, he is definitely the coolest one. Being the son of Lucius Fox, Luke is a tech genius, graduating a year early with 2 degrees from MIT. His tech prowess really aids him as he has an incredibly advanced suit of armor that does a lot. For example, the suit has a full faceplate, retractable cape, and an interior skin that monitors vital signs and enacts first aid, like hardening around broken bones to hold the bone in place and administering painkillers. It gives Luke a form of invisibility, detective vision, holograms, it can access the GCPD computers, features gyroscopic assist, a terrain map, shock charges, a kinetic patch, anti-personnel plates, and just so much more. This is on top of Luke's training as an MMA fighter before his Batman training. Unfortunately, he just hasn't received a chance to shine in the spotlight yet and primarily works as a supporting character in most Bat family storylines. Number 4, Stephanie Brown. I feel like there are a lot of mixed feelings on Stephanie Brown out there. She has had an interesting history as a member of the Bat family. Originally, Stephanie fought against her father, the villain Cluemaster, under the vigilante name Spoiler. She would usually fight alongside Tim Drake Robin, and they had a bit of a relationship going on the side. Now, Batman eventually trained her up some, and when Tim was forced to step down, thanks to his own father, Stephanie even took up the title of Robin. But this was pretty short-lived, as she actually did not make a very good Robin, constantly disobeying orders and pursuing criminals on her own, which eventually led to her downfall. She ended up in the hospital, and it was really questionable if she would even pull through. Luckily though, she did survive and even went on to succeed Cassandra Cain, becoming the 3rd Batgirl. Now, the 2 of them, Cassandra and Stephanie, are the duo known as the Batgirls. Number 3, Huntress. Like a lot of the Bat family superheroes that we have already talked about, there have been a few versions of Huntress. The original was Helena Wayne, the daughter of both Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, and that character was loved. Unfortunately though, that character belongs to what is known as Earth 2, which is essentially the world of the original DC heroes, but she has not remained the Prime Earth's Huntress. Instead, we now have Helena Bartonelli. Well, sort of. We also have a Helena Wayne, but she's from an alternate future of Prime Earth. Are you confused? Cause so am I. Let's just talk about Bartonelli. The only surviving member of the Bartonelli crime family, Helena has dedicated her life to a vendetta on crime after her family was wiped out by being a part of said crime. She was actually incredibly ruthless, very much willing to take the lives of criminals, which brought her and Batman to odds on a few occasions. But with that famous determination, Batman was eventually able to sway her way of thinking just a tiny bit. She was also done really well in the Birds of Prey movie, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. Number 2, Azrael. Another hero title with multiple bearers. This time though, it's a little different. The title of Azrael belongs to the chosen warrior of the Sacred Order of St. Dumas, cloned and enhanced, subconsciously trained and conditioned, and raised to be a perfect soldier. The most famous, and the one I'm going to talk about today, is John Paul Valley. Once he became Azrael, Valley had encountered both Bruce and Alfred in Switzerland, saving them and actually abandoning his own order for Bruce Wayne's moral values, and he went back to Gotham with both of them. He impressed Bruce Wayne so much within his time that when Bruce eventually had his back broken by Bane, it was Valley who Bruce chose to continue the Batman name. Fortunately, this didn't go too well, as he lost his grip on reality and fell from grace. But he is an incredibly cool and capable character who has arguably gotten much better on the more recent Prime Earth. Number 1, Ghostmaker. Minkoa Khan, Ghostmaker, is essentially Bruce Wayne's rival from his formative years into becoming Batman. Kind of like how in Pokemon games you always have a rival who you hate but kind of respect because they always challenge you and help you improve. Ghostmaker trained with a large number of the same mentors that taught Bruce Wayne, and it's arguable that Ghostmaker is actually equal to Batman. The difference between the two is mainly in ideologies. For starters, Ghostmaker is kind of a psychopath. Bruce Wayne is not exactly psychologically sound, but he has a strong moral code, whereas Ghostmaker fights crime as if it's a kind of sport, and he has absolutely zero qualms with taking someone permanently out of the picture. Operating mostly in Southeast Asia, he constantly tried to get Bruce to see things from his point of view, which eventually led the two to agree to just stay out of each other's way. This guy is very much rated, but for most fans of Batman, learning about Ghostmaker will come as a surprise.
Number 10, what if the X-Men had lost Inferno? This very chaotic and fire-filled demon horde-infested story comes to us from What If Volume 2, issue number 6. And we are starting it off hot, friends. This is quite a dark story. Here we get to imagine what the fate of the world would have been like had the X-Men failed in defeating Madeline Pryor during the events of Inferno. Instead, she and Sim take over the planet Earth, unleashing hordes of demons on it and ruling it together. However, the heroes who have survived their reign of terror manage to band together and, using their power, fight back. In the end, they do win the day, but not without casualties. Wolverine himself in the story ends up becoming the pet of the Goblin Queen, and Sim fully giving into his feral rage and feeding on the innocent. Ugh. He only becomes free from the fog of his rage after he kills Kitty Pryde tragically and realizes the monster that he has become. Number 9. What if Captain America were revived today? 1983. Because there's another one of these from like, I think 1994, so yeah, but that's in volume 2. We're going to volume 1. There are actually a few different stories involving Captain America being revived in the modern day or simply evolving with time as it passed. So 1994, and I think there's also another one of them which might even be on this list. But in this What If from volume 1, issue 44, we get a darker take on what a modern day Cap could look like in the 80s. This version of the hero ends up turning America into a heavily monitored and policed country during his witch hunt for communists. Fortunately, as dark as that all is, we learn that this isn't the real Captain America but an imposter that took his place after he went MIA. The real Cap returns and battles it out with imposter Cap, but in the end, the real Captain America turns to the people of America to undo all the damage done. He asks them to take responsibility, as while they were led to this point by a false version of him, they also allowed themselves to be led falsely. It's honestly a really good speech that even today rings true in a lot of ways, at least for me, and it provides the silver lining and shining hope for an otherwise pretty dark tale. Little grains of hope, that's all we need. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more what if lists, be sure to let us know by giving this a thumbs up, sharing it, doing all the things. Also, if you want more what if content, we do have a playlist now for that. Yay! Number 8. What if Wolverine killed the Hulk? In issue 31 of the 1977 What If series, we find out what would happen if instead when Wolverine first met the Hulk, he had killed him. Wolverine goes on to celebrate his victory against the big green Goliath after killing him, having some drinks and throwing some punches like he usually does at the local tavern. However, in the end, things get out of hand and he accidentally kills one of the patrons in a rage. When he seeks help from the military to protect and defend him, they actually turn their back on Wolverine, and so he ends up joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He becomes a sleeper agent for Magneto, infiltrating the X-Men. However, when Magneto finally plans on enacting his plan to defeat and capture the X-Men, Wolverine has a change of heart, feeling as though he has truly found acceptance and a family with the mutant team of heroes. He battles Magneto one-on-one, and the two kill one another in the end. It's a pretty tragic tale. Basically, all what ifs with Wolverine I feel like are usually pretty sad. Pretty sad or pretty dark. Number 7. What if Captain America had not vanished during World War II? See, another Captain America story because I love these. This story comes to us from issue 5 of volume 1, aka the 1977 What If series. While Captain America does not get trapped in the ice and Bucky never goes missing, presumed dead, only to become brainwashed and repurposed by the Soviet Union as the Winter Soldier, a worse fate seemingly awaits both of these heroes. Neither having ever disappeared, Steve goes on to fight as Captain America until he eventually retires from the mantle, becoming instead the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bucky ends up taking his place, becoming the new Cap, as we have also seen happen in modern comics, and Rick Jones ends up becoming Buck's new sidekick, also going by the mantle of Bucky. Because I guess Rick or Ricky just doesn't have the same zing to it? Sadly though, Cap Bucky ends up dying on a mission, and Sharon Carter, Agent 13, who had hoped to settle down with Bucky after his final mission, blames Steve for his death. She actually accuses him of robbing him of his childhood and putting him in danger. Pretty intense. And then of course it ends with Rick volunteering to become the new Cap, so the deadly cycle it seems is destined to still continue in this timeline. You'd feel like after that all happened, Steve might be like, maybe we won't do that again, it didn't go great the last time. But he's just like, ah yes, Rick Jones, now you will be Captain America and probably die. What if the Green Goblin stole the Infinity Gauntlet? This story comes to us from the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot. Here we see Green Goblin dealing with a lot of family drama and trauma from his past. He steals the Infinity Gauntlet and not only uses it to defeat, well, all the heroes of planet Earth and beyond, but it's also revealed that his true motivation for doing all of this and pretty much everything that he's done is to win his father's approval. His father, who was always so unimpressed and who for a long time mistreated him, pushing Norman towards greatness or else. When Norman showcases his villainous accomplishments, it only causes his father to revile him even more though. Norman then decides to use his Infinity Gauntlet to snap and influence his father, making him proud of him instead. But this makes his father's love and approval feel pretty empty, especially when Norman learns that his altered dad actually really only loves him just because he's his son, and not for all that he has accomplished. Which you would think would be really nice, but to Norman he's like, that's infuriating, I hate that. Norman erases his father from existence, and in so doing, erases himself. Don't you hate when that happens? Number 5. Marvel Zombies Resurrection. While not an exact what if series, Marvel Zombies Resurrection definitely feels like a what if version of the Marvel Zombies world that imagines a completely new scenario involving zombies based on established Marvel lore, where Galactus becomes infected with a mysterious new virus that it turns out was created by the Brood, dun dun dun, to infect people more efficiently, turning them instead into zombies. The whole series from 2020 and the intro to it from 2019 that kind of explains all of the lore that you need to know to jump in is all pretty bleak, with only a few people on Earth making it out alive in the end, and still fighting basically just to survive after the world has pretty much been completely infected after Galactus' corpse is hurled to the Earth to be used as a kind of zombie creating bomb. But while the story is pretty dark in terms of all the great heroes that we lose, do not worry. At least Carol's Flurkin cat Chewie stays safe. Thank goodness. In case like me you read this and you were worried the whole time about that little fur baby, I was like, no, please don't let Chewie die, Chewie's so cute. Chewie is also a badass, so really there's no need to worry. Chewie's like one of the best fighters in this entire series, which I love. Number 4. What if Clint Barton killed Norman Osborn during Dark Reign? This what if comes answered in the What If Dark Reign one-shot. Here we get to see what could have happened had Clint Barton's plan to kill Norman Osborn actually come together. Clint himself ends up making a martyr out of Osborn though, unfortunately, and becomes a wanted man in the process. One civilian decides to take the matter of justice into his own hands, calling out the assassin, Clint Francis Barton. And if he doesn't show himself, he threatens to blow up the entire Sunday Inn and all the innocent people that are inside it. Hawkeye does show up though and attempts to talk the man down, but surprisingly, the man pulls a gun and shoots Clint point blank to death rather than surrender. He is taken away, and in the end, Hammer remains in control under Deputy Director, likely now full director actually, Victoria Hand. Basically, if Hawkeye had actually killed Norman Osborn, it would be bad, I think, in the long run. I think that's what we learned. Number 3. What if the Kingdom of Kane? In What If issue 94 out of the 1989 series, also known as Volume 2, we get to visit a world destroyed by the Sentinels. Oh goody. The Sentinels did not only take out all of mutant kind supposedly, but also killed all of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, and its general population of non-powered individuals who were killed by high levels of radiation that the Sentinels emitted. The only one to survive all this destruction is Juggernaut, who wanders the Earth for years reminiscing on his past and all of his wrongdoings, and feeling unbearably lonely all the while. Poor Juggernaut. Magneto shows up and confirms that everything that has come to pass is Juggernaut's fault because he killed Professor X, which was basically the catalyst event for this chain reaction of destruction that has now come to pass. Juggernaut finds and kind of falls into a secret bunker as a result of his fight with Magneto, where he learns that some mutants survived and are actually hiding out. Yay! When they ask him to leave them be though, he refuses, only to learn that this was an attempt to protect themselves against the radiation, which he is now let in by breaking into the bunker, infecting them and ultimately sentencing them to death. So, it's really sad. Juggernaut's like, I'm lonely, I just want to talk to you. And they're just like, you just killed us, so thanks for that. He's like, wow. I ruin everything, this is terrible. Number 2. What If the Traitor? In this alternate tale that comes to us from the 1989 volume of What If issue -1, we get to see what would happen if Trevor Fitzroy went back in time to try and convince Professor X to never create the X-Men. Although Bishop travels back in time to try and stop Fitzroy, it doesn't end up working out. Fitzroy shows the Professor of the future to come and all the war and prosecution that mutants will suffer. When Professor X meets Bishop, he inquires of Jean's fate and learns that she perishes, but that he and his X-Men remain a symbol of hope for the people. Unable to accept the dark future that awaits, however, Professor X seemingly agrees, despite Bishop's pleas, to never let the X-Men form, and Bishop ends up being locked up in prison in the past, with both Fitzroy and Bishop believing the other is the traitor. But who's really the traitor? Number 1. What if Spider-Man Back in Black? This story reimagines what would have happened had MJ ended up being shot by the Kingpin's hitman instead of Aunt May. Mary Jane as such does not end up in intensive care hanging to life by a thread, but instead dies pretty much instantly. This makes Peter lose control, going into a dark rage unlike any we've ever seen. He doesn't just plan on scaring and potentially finishing the Kingpin if MJ dies, because I mean she's already dead, but instead he plans on just straight up setting out to kill whoever was responsible for the hit, which he of course does find out was still Kingpin in this reality. Donning his black costume, he heads out planning to put an end to Kingpin once and for all, despite Aunt May and Iron Man trying to stop him and calm him down. In the end, Peter succeeds in killing Kingpin, Aunt May basically disowns him, and Iron Man has him arrested for murder, citing the Superhero Registration Act. Peter blames Iron Man for all this mess, by the way, demanding a trial with a jury, and Iron Man denies any wrongdoing, claiming Peter made his choice.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Thor and Jane Foster. The God of Thunder from Down Under and Jane Foster. Now, we see this relationship in the MCU, not that much though. See, it's said in the beginning of Thor Ragnarok that they broke up, so already this relationship in the MCU is pretty rocky. But now with Natalie Portman confirmed for Thor Love and Thunder next year, we may even go a bit darker with their romance. See, in the comics, their relationship began in the 60s when readers were introduced to Jane. She attended med school and was soon hired by Dr. Donald Blake, who was actually Thor in disguise. They're the king and queen of long distance. I mean, one lives on Earth, the other lives on Asgard, Asgard, and at one point Jane actually takes over and becomes the god of thunder at a time where Thor was unworthy of wielding Mjolnir. Her time as Thor is pretty exciting, but the only catch was that her cancer would worsen every time she used her powers to save the day. So let's just hope we don't have to endure that on the big screen, because the comics was hard enough. That was way too sad. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and toss this video a like, because it really helps the channel out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some dark Marvel romances. Number 9, Crystal and the Human Torch. In Fantastic Four issue 45, Johnny Flame and Crystal meet and they hit it off. Naturally, being, Johnny saw her and immediately thought that she was something out of a fairy tale. How cute. So he approached her, and of course this spooked her, causing this giant gust of wind, a quick storm, and then poof, she was gone, nowhere to be seen. Johnny is like, what the blazes was that? Why is she gone? How did this happen? Mysteries, mysteries. A few pages later, he runs into her again, but this time they show each other their superpowers, and that makes them instantly bond. The Fantastic Four needed a replacement temporarily while Sue was recovering from having their first child. So this Inhuman, Crystal, was looking to fill that spot. Johnny and her were close. They dated after this, and then Crystal was front cover by time Fantastic Four issue 81 rolled around. And then in Avengers issue 104, after a battle with a Sentinel, Quicksilver is hurt. The two of them ended up getting close as well, maybe a bit too close, because then she fell in love with Pietro. Sorry, Johnny, just not hot enough this time, it seems. Number 8, Crystal and Quicksilver. It happens, okay? Maybe you're with somebody, you meet another person, you just can't help it. Love is love. You gotta chase those feelings. It's not easy. So when it comes to Quicksilver, chasing doesn't take that long, being super fast and all. Crystal and Johnny broke up after she admitted to falling in love with Pietro, and then they got married. Now this sounds like Johnny is the only one who got hurt here, but that's not the case for long. Crystal and Pietro's marriage was the first between an Inhuman and a human in history, so it was kind of a big deal. They ended up having a daughter who surprisingly was born without any powers, and they named her Luna after the world that she was born on. Quicksilver believed that he had the right to subject the child to the Terrigen Mist, but Crystal wanted her to grow up normal. So their marriage now began to spiral. Quicksilver's temper was ruining things, and Crystal had an affair with another man named Norm Webster. She told Quicksilver while she was unwell and half asleep. It was wild. Funny enough, Norm was actually the same guy who sold to Vision and Scarlet Witch their home in Vision and Scarlet Witch issue 1, volume 2. Once Norman found out that Crystal was married, he was like, nah, I'm out of here. I'm bouncing. See ya. Crystal then left Quicksilver with Luna and then returned to the Fantastic Four, searching for that relationship with Johnny again. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Number 7, Thor and Lady Sif. This next one, okay, I think this will be a central plot for the next Thor movie, perhaps. When it comes to Norse mythology, Thor's wife is Lady Sif. In the comics, it's not that easy. See, they were on and off for a while, and we see glimpses of this in the MCU. With Lady Sif's absence in Ragnarok, fans can expect her to return into Thor's life, kind of like Bo Peep in Toy Story 4. She's still around, she's just not around here right now, per se. In Journey into Mystery, issue 102, Thor had fallen in love with Lady Sif, so much so that when Sif had been kidnapped by storm giants and ended up as a prisoner of Hela, Thor straight up offered his own life in order to save hers. And Hela was so impressed that she let them both go. She was like, wow, go make out, go do something, that's great, you guys are great. And then in Thor 236, Lady Sif sacrificed her own life in order to save Jane's. Now, while this may seem like a rather dark plot, I'm sure we'll get some sort of version in it in the next Thor movie. Maybe the reality gem has caused some life-altering effects to Jane, and Lady Sif can somehow be the only one to save her at the end of the movie. Number 6, Black Widow and Bruce Banner. Remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming Bruce Banner down? They were in love, probably. I mean, I think, maybe? I mean, they were flirting at the beginning of Age of Ultron. Even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws, go for it. I insist. And then cut to later in the movie, they're at Clint's secret family farmhouse talking about running away together. And then after all this time, Bruce finally returns to Earth in Infinity War, and he says hi to Nat, and then she says hi back, and that's kind of it. Well, according to Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly tried to, but it became very clear that if the scene was just not the A-plot of the movie, it couldn't survive Infinity War. He said that thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. He said you couldn't wrap up loose threads just because you wanted to. That's a valid point, but when Natasha sacrifices her life in order to allow Hawkeye to get the Soul Stone, Banner just like throws a bench. I mean, I was seriously expecting more heartbreak from him. I was actually expecting him to kind of Hulk out a bit, but no, he wears cardigans now, so he's all good. Number 5, Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy. This one left average moviegoers stunned in theaters when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hit the big screen. We see the famous death of Gwen Stacy from the comics on the screen, and it's so sad. God, it's so sad. This horrible moment comes from issue 121 of The Amazing Spider-Man, where the Green Goblin drops her off the Brooklyn Bridge, and although Peter has his trusty webs, sometimes the angle just doesn't cut it, and then he caught her the wrong way, and Gwen Stacy's neck ended up snapping from the momentum. Eagle Eye fans could spot the clock tower in Amazing Spider-Man 2 striking 12:10, which references that of issue 121. Number 4, Black Panther and Monica Lynn. Monica first appeared in comics back in Avengers issue 73. She grew up in Georgia but moved to New York, where she then met Black Panther. T'Challa saved Lynn from the Sons of the Serpent, and usually when there's saving involved, loving comes after. They hit it off, so much so that Monica actually lived in Wakanda with her prince as well. In Black Panther, Panther's Prey issue 4, he calls off the engagement without giving an explanation why. But then in Black Panther volume 4, issue 16, Monica Lynn is seen performing. She's a great singer in the comics, and she sings a sad love song to a sold-out crowd in Washington, D.C. Through her lyrics, she reflects on her heartbreak and the fact that T'Challa is marrying someone else. He actually ends up marrying Storm. Wow, what an artist. She turns her pain into passion. She's like Adele, but better. Number 3, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Cyclops and Jean Grey became close in the school for gifted youngsters after Scott was given a visor made of ruby quartz. He could then control his powers and shortly became the deputy leader of the X-Men, and then of course fell in love with his teammate, the wonderful Jean Grey. Sounds like a dream when it comes to the gifted youngsters, no? I mean, they're super close, and of course their romance was a fan favorite. She's in his head as well. I mean that in a literal sense. Jean created a psychic link between them both, giving them the ability to read each other's minds. Guys, just a pause right there. Would you ever want that with your significant other? Would you ever want like your brains to be linked and you know what each other's thinking about? I mean, that's trust. That's a lot of trust. I can't tell if I would hate that or love that. They went strong until Jean sacrificed herself to save everybody from the Dark Phoenix in X-Men 137. And Scott would surely take his time moving on until he married Madeline Pryor, of course. Number 2, Vision and Scarlet Witch. Perhaps one of the most interesting couples in the MCU, and especially after the events of WandaVision have just unfolded last week, it's fair to say that this deserves a spot on the list as well. He's an android and she's a witch, and they go through a lot together. So Vision and Wanda tied the knot back in 1974, and they've even welcomed twins at one point. Catch was, those twins of Wanda and Visions came out of nowhere, and it was then revealed that their souls were actually part of Mephisto, which was actually a running theory in WandaVision for a while, but that might have been too dark for the show, which makes sense. So these twins have been in the comics to grow up to become Wiccan and Speed, and in the MCU, Wanda and Vision's romance is super fun to watch for the most part. I mean, they joke and bond over paprika, they watch sitcoms, and they have incredibly deep conversations about love. They both got their abilities from the same Infinity Stone in the MCU, so they're literally connected in a way. In the finale of WandaVision, she says goodbye yet again to her love, and this time it's on their terms. Now with the other White Vision being free, and he's basically another version of that same Vision, odds are it's going to be even more heartbreaking once Wanda leans into this villain role in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and they yet again have to say goodbye for like the 4th time. I've lost count at this point. And finally, number 1, Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. When it comes to character arcs in the MCU, Endgame did a really good job of wrapping storylines up for most of our characters. I mean, Black Widow for sure could have used a funeral, but I mean, her solo movie is coming up, so maybe we'll see more of that then. But when it comes to Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, she used to work for him, answering his calls, watching him tinker around in the basement, building Mark II. They had their ups and downs throughout the years. Like in Civil War, Tony and Pepper were separated, and then at the end of Homecoming, Tony pops out an engagement ring, and then things come to a tragic end, of course, when Tony sacrifices his life in order to wipe out Thanos and his army. Of course, repeating the same words that kicked off this entire thing in the first place, those being, "I am Iron Man." So now with Pepper being more than capable of suiting up herself and helping out in the battle, could we see more of her in the MCU, perhaps in her Iron Man suit? Probably not, it doesn't seem like we will, but hopefully. Time will tell. Fingers crossed.
Number 10, Hawkeye kills Black Widow. We tend to talk a lot on Top 10 Nerd about one of the darkest areas of Marvel's comic lines and alternate worlds, the Ultimates, the Earth of 1610. In this reality, Black Widow becomes a villain after betraying Tony Stark. While her betrayal of Iron Man and her fellow teammates is a dark enough story, we're going to talk about what happens after the betrayal that we all tend to focus on more. Hawkeye ends up being betrayed by Natasha as well. His entire family is slaughtered because of her, and he is taken in, questioned, and tortured. Brutally brutally tortured. Because in the Ultimates reality, he actually has a family, similar to the one that you actually see in the MCU. Clint impressively escapes his captors using only his detached fingernails as weaponized projectiles to take them out. He then hunts down Natasha, who was incapacitated by Tony and is in the hospital. Hawkeye kills her with an arrow to the head, but only after he pins her hands to the walls with arrows. Youch. The whole thing is pretty dark. Number 9. Cyclops eliminates Professor X. There was a time when Professor X was seen as a full-fledged hero, a brilliant man with a desire only to see and create harmony and equality in the world. Ah, isn't that nice? Since his introduction, however, more and more seeds of doubt kept cropping up when it came to his methods in terms of training his X-Men and attempting to achieve his lofty goals. By the time the Phoenix Five had come about, many mutants and readers were divided on just how heroic and good Professor X really was. Still, when Cyclops, in a Phoenix-induced rage, was approached by Xavier, who tried to reason with Scott and calm him down as his sort of father figure and mentor, we all suspected Scott would listen. Instead, Scott completely obliterated Professor Xavier, and regardless of your mixed feelings about Professor X, the scene was pretty tragic. Even Scott admitted, despite being under the influence of the Phoenix Force, that he had done wrong, and even agreed that he should atone for the murder. Granted, this wasn't the first time Professor X had died, but it was one of his darkest deaths, being killed by one of his most prized students. Number 8. Deadpool kills his parents. Wade Wilson, being an insane mercenary and former assassin, is of course one of the darker characters Marvel has to offer. And yet even Deadpool for the most part manages to keep things pretty humorous and light. This is a dude who refers to all vampires as Draculas. This is a hero who is so insane it's basically humorous, and who uses jokes to likely mask his own pain. But despite being a regular comedian, Deadpool has gone through some pretty dark and crazy times, and done and seen some pretty crazy stuff. One such dark adventure of his was during the time he was brainwashed by Butler into killing his parents. Deadpool of course did not know who they were. He appears to recognize items in the house like an old baseball glove that perhaps once belonged to him in another life, but a job's a job, he reasons. He dismisses his gut instinct and burns the house to the ground while his parents are asleep upstairs, completely unaware of course that they are his parents. Even Sabretooth feels bad about this incident. Number 7. Really close brother-sister relationship. Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver have always been close in the comics, but one series in alternate reality took their relationship a little too far. The Wanda Maximoff of Earth 1610, the Ultimates reality, has an even closer relationship, and creepier one, with her brother it seems. In Ultimates 3, writer Jeff Loeb decided to confirm that their flirtations were, well, more than that, and that brother and sister were actually in a romantic and very physical relationship with one another. Even more dark and disturbing, Pietro also compliments his sister on how she looks more and more like their mother every day before getting it on with her. Brings a whole new meaning to the phrase keeping it in the family. Ick. Number 6. Death of Daken. Last issues of comic series often tend to be the most epic, and for 2010's Uncanny X-Force, that expectation held true. Although the climax of the story ended up being a lot more tragic and dark than happy and celebratory. Daken ends up being manipulated by Sabretooth, who proves here how much of a master strategist he can be when it leads to Wolverine being forced to take out Daken, drowning him in a puddle. Wolverine holds back during the beginning of the fight, feeling the weight of what he knows he must do, and when he does end up striking out full force, it's Daken's dreams and thoughts we see in between panels of his father drowning him. Daken imagines what life being raised by Logan, being a family unit, would be like. It's heart-wrenching. And afterwards, Sabretooth is there to gloat and reveal that Wolverine killing Daken was all because of his machinations. Just another way, maybe one of the worst ways, that Sabretooth has wounded Logan over the years. Such a well-written, such a sad story, ugh. Number 5. Old Man Logan. One of the bleakest series to come out of Marvel. Old Man Logan as a character is from the alternate universe of Earth 807128, an alternate world where supervillains won against all the superheroes. This version of the character was created by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven, and has received 2 of his own series, which started out being written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Andrea Sorrentino. The first run is not just dark in terms of its setting, but the pencils and colors also perfectly match the tone of Old Man Logan, a violent, post-apocalyptic world where Logan finds himself constantly haunted by the ghosts of his past. Dun dun dun. ghosts. Number 4. Zombieverse. Another alternate world, and in this case slew of series, that managed to be even darker than Old Man Logan belong to the place we refer to as the Zombieverse, or the alternate Earth of 2149. Here all of your favorite heroes have died or been replaced by zombies, or likely a little bit of both. This reality is where we saw Spider-Man eat Aunt May and MJ, unable to stop himself from killing them. We also see She-Hulk eat Valerian, Franklin Richards, the children of her teammates and friends from the Fantastic Four. It's also the alternate world where Hank Pym's Ant-Man keeps Black Panther alive so he can slowly saw off pieces of him and eat them while they're fresh to satiate his hunger. Ugh, the Zombieverse it's really something else. I have to go there so often and I'm just like, man, sometimes I wish I could just not go there. Number 3. Hydra Cap. Captain America is known for being one of the most good, most noble characters that Marvel has. He's kind of like Marvel's Superman when it comes to ideals. He stands for liberty, freedom, and justice. He's got a bit of a classic honesty to him as well, being a hero sort of launched out of time or displaced out of time. So it shocked everyone when it was revealed that he was a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra, dun dun dun, and had been playing us this whole time. Of course, he hadn't. Well, he had, but it wasn't necessarily by choice. Reality had been altered when an organic, child-appearing version of the Cosmic Cube, known as Kobik, was influenced by Red Skull, and then attempted to revive a dying Steve Rogers, turning him into, you know, the Steve Rogers that we had when he was part of Hydra. Alternate Steve Rogers. Number 2. We're in the endgame now. When Thanos was revealed to be the biggest bad that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had yet to face, the supervillain who'd been plotting in the background of the film since almost the beginning, we were all pretty confident that all of our heroes united could take him down, right? If not, we were waiting for the teased-at Adam Warlock to appear out of the sky and Deus Ex Machina us out of this mess. But in the Avengers film Infinity War, that is not what happened. Instead, Thanos showed up and with the help of his goon squad, the Black Order, ended up managing to defeat Earth's mightiest heroes and get his hands on the Infinity Stones. Thor arrived just in time to stop him, but keeping things PG with his aim and targeting Thanos' chest instead of his head, well, that would come back to haunt him. Thanos managed to also defeat Thor and snap 50% of the universe out of existence, giving us some of the darkest times our heroes had seen yet, and some of the saddest death scenes in the MCU when we lost teenage Groot and Peter Parker. Sad. Number 1. Ruins. This 2-part miniseries is from 1995 and it is probably the darkest reimagining of Marvel's main continuity. In Ruins, superheroes still exist, but superpowers often come with disastrous consequences and side effects. Cannot stop his limbs from uncontrollably shaking, apparently. We see this reality's version of him referred to as Quickie being kept in a mutant prison. He has had all of his limbs amputated for his own good, so they claim. But you know, it's Wilson Fisk as a prison guard, so probably can't trust that. In Ruins, Wolverine has also had to suffer as a result of his powers. His skin is falling off as a result of adamantium poisoning his body from the inside out. Bruce Banner's gamma radiation, instead of transforming him into the Hulk, simply causes his body to sprout many large green tumors, causing him to swell until he explodes.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Bucky's death. Of course, why not start at the beginning after all? So, near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo in the meantime. The bomb went off, hurling Steve Rogers and Bucky into freezing cold waters. And for Cap, well, he came out of this pretty easy, as we all know. He remained frozen, just hanging out. Bucky though, good old trusty sidekick Buck, Bucky wasn't so lucky after all. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel, so they scooped him up. Why not? It's like Alaskan crab fishermen, but with, you know, assassins. So they fixed him up a fancy new metal arm, brainwashed him, and turned him into a brutal assassin. He has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce fighter, but he doesn't remember how he knows these things, making him a deadly assassin and a pretty badass villain. Now this is Steve Rogers' right-hand man. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. And this was also a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014, and we're still watching Bucky try and weave his way through all this drama and past. It's not an easy road for the guy. Poor Buck. Yeah, it's never been easy for him. You feel bad for him. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does a lot over for us at our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's keep going with this crazy list. Number 9. Red Room training. Natasha Romanova. She was trained in the Red Room since she was young, and amongst one of those leading forces of her training was the Winter Soldier. He's one of the best, so it makes sense that he passes on his skills. So Natasha was part of the Black Widow Ops program, and then he would come in and help her with combat training, while also handling the Wolf Spider Ops program. So they worked together a bit. They were all training under this big, bad roof. They even had a thing for each other briefly until he was deemed unstable and put back under cryostasis. That's gotta suck though, right? Whenever you're not being used, they're like, awesome, go clean that, and then you're frozen again until we need you in 50 years. Number 8, Jasper Sitwell. He posed as a high-ranking SHIELD agent in the MCU when in actuality he was a Hydra infiltrator. Played by Maximiliano Hernandez, Jasper Sitwell was trained at the Hydra Preparatory Academy. And he's been in Marvel movies for a while now, starting with Thor back in 2011 as just a SHIELD agent. So he met his brutal fate in Captain America Winter Soldier when Bucky straight up threw him out of a car. It was so fast, scared the life out of me in the theaters. Now this happens of course when SHIELD is compromised and all of the shady agents are called out for double dipping into Hydra. So Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon are driving Jasper Sitwell to base in order to use him as a path through the security, and he's in the middle of explaining how this plan is a horrible idea, and before he can even finish, the Winter Soldier finishes him. Before the Winter Soldier's arm comes out of nowhere and then tosses him out, interrupting him. It's great. Number 7, Stiltman. Stiltman, okay, now he may not be the coolest villain by any means, and this is coming from a guy who basically is a Stiltman himself. I mean, I'm a tall dude, it's tough. You bump your head on stuff a lot, you gotta kind of duck. I have back problems now because I duck too much. That's the life of a Stiltman. It's not easy. Now in Civil War, the villain was killed by the Punisher, but in What If House of M, we see him still hanging out with some other villains, like Shocker and Trapster. And then the Winter Soldier takes him out in one single page. It's so easy to miss. So right now, Stiltman is still kicking around in the main continuity. He was resurrected in 2017. So let's just hope the Winter Soldier is the one to take him out again. I mean, after all, it was done so quick. I mean, probably didn't feel much. I'm sure a good amount of people would miss this while they were reading this What If comic. It happened so fast. That's how precise Bucky is. One shot, and you're done. Number 6, Jack Monroe. He made his debut in Young Men issue 24. Now, Jack had a rough upbringing. His parents weren't the greatest by any means, and he grew up idolizing Captain America and his partner Bucky. Now, this is around 1953, right? He looked up to Bucky so much that he started referring to himself as Bucky. And when he attended school, he was taught by William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers, and then he even got some work done on his face to match the look. Talk about a fan. So he ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. Sounds like the dream team. That sounds great. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some good work. The only thing was, a year later, things started to turn. Things started to go wrong. Yeah, they started to become paranoid schizophrenics from the serum, so the government had to put them in cryogenic suspension. Now, when they were discovered in the modern age, Jack then would go after Cap, Cap would win, and then put him back in the ice. Jack in the ice, that's some Titanic stuff right there. Eventually, after rehab, Jack was allowed to be free. So then we find at the end of Captain America issue 3, volume 5, we find him at a bar where he's drinking and he doesn't look too good. So as he's leaving this bar, he hears a voice call out to him, and then he's shot and then put in the back of a car. Who did he get shot by? Well, the Winter Soldier himself, the guy he idolized. And if you think that's bad, things only somehow got worse involving Jack Monroe. The whole bomb situation, which I'll get into a little later. Number 5, Itsu Akihiro. So last video I did was on the many romances of Wolverine, and most of the ladies in Logan's life end up meeting a dark and cruel fate, like Itsu Akihiro, the woman Logan met while he was in Japan after World War II. She was living in Jasmine Falls and met Logan during his 4th year of training with Bando Saburo, who at the time was teaching him how to be a man and leave the warrior nature in his past. Now the two had fallen in love at this point, and shortly after she was expecting a baby. So one day Logan was proving himself worthy of being a man, and more importantly as a father, during a combat exercise. And then an explosion caught him off guard and one of his claws popped out and he accidentally stabbed a villager. And then he was banned from the village. So then he went to go say goodbye to Itsu in their home and he found her dead. Now who's to blame here but again the Winter Soldier. Yep, he was acting under Romulus's order in order to get Logan out of hiding and back to Madripoor. And let's just say, the plan kind of worked. Number 4, Tony Stark's parents. Civil War is one of my favorite Marvel movies to watch, especially when these guys finally battle it out, because there's years of history behind it. It's not just a random thing that pops up and they're like, hey, let's fight. This is a real conflict. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed again by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie is politics. It's superhero politics, like in the comic, minus, the kids getting blown up at the beginning of the comic. We're gonna leave that part out. But in the film adaptation, Tony sides with the government in the Sokovia Accords. He feels responsible for the deaths, especially one of Charles Spencer at the end of Age of Ultron. And Steve, he just wants to protect Bucky. He knows that he's brainwashed, and freedom throughout the team certainly wouldn't hurt as well. Now eventually, due to Baron Zemo's sneaky little work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and then it's revealed. The true reason behind Zemo's plans with the Winter Soldier was to break apart the Avengers by showing Stark footage of a brainwashed Bucky assassinate Tony's parents. And he did it in order to steal the super soldier serum, so he took out his parents and then made other super soldiers. This should count as like a twofer right here. It's a pretty wild moment. It's super dark, probably the darkest that the MCU is going in terms of like actual death and human conflict. And then the next 10 minutes in that movie were treated to Tony just trying to take out Bucky for what he did, while Steve intervenes trying to keep it cool. And then we all know where that ended up. So yeah, Bucky was kind of the reason for most of the Avengers to break up. Should be number 1, there we go. Number 3, Mother Night. Susan Scarborough made her comic book debut in Captain America issue 123. So Susan and her brother were stage hypnotists who turned to crime, which I feel like more supervillains should definitely do. Hey, if you can do magic or anything like that, for sure be a villain. If you can make something disappear, you've done it. You're now a villain. Congratulations. So yeah, they used hypnotism to put together an army. I already love these guys. Awesome. So she would take over gangs with hypnotism, which sounds like the funniest thing ever. And of course, at one point, she tried to turn over S.H.I.E.L.D. and take control. But luckily, Captain America wasn't gonna let her little magic hypnotist trick work. No. So soon she became known as Mother Night, which sounds cooler, definitely. And she started working her way up and got close to the Red Skull. She liked him. He didn't like her, not like that, There was no hypnotism that was turning his heart this time. Then in part 3 of Captain America Out of Time, Union Jack finds the Red Skull men in the London Underground not alive, and one of those bodies amongst them was Mother Night. It was of course revealed that this was the doings of the Winter Soldier after the fact, and in order to show how dangerous this villain was, he needed to take out this hypnotist villain that has been around for 30 years. 30 years, and then it's like, hey, Bucky took him out. I lied.
Number 2, Cersei. Cersei is a bit of a tough pick. On one hand, she isn't underrated at all. She's an incredibly powerful, evil magic wielder, and she could very easily serve as the complete antithesis to Wonder Woman. But on the other hand, she just kinda doesn't. Cersei is a legendary sorceress from Greek mythology. She's immortal and undying, is a centuries-old enchantress with goddess-level powers. She's been on some of the biggest evil teams, but yet she just kind of falls short on most occasions. She was even one of the witch-marked, and I think that's been my favorite of her shows, but even then, she's not the big bad, when I believe that Cersei has the potential to be a whole Justice League level threat all by her lonesome if she was just given the right story. I'm not hugely knowledgeable on her, I'll admit that, so if I'm missing a story where she is given this attention, please let me know in the comments down below. And finally, in at number 1 is Rune, Ultraverse's cosmic energy vampire who fought Conan, Thor, Venom, and Silver Surfer. He's owned by Marvel and Disney, but he cannot be used without permission of the creator, Barry Windsor Smith, so he's currently pretty dormant. Now, Rune began his life as an anthropomorphic-like alien in the Ultraverse before he encountered the magical Starstones. The effects of the Starstones did more than grant him everlasting life. They damned him to live in a horrific and grotesque body, as well as instilling him with a craving for blood and the life force of others that the Starstones required in order to give him power. Following the events of Godwheel, which affected the little-known Ultraverse alongside the 616 universe in Marvel Comics, Thor opened a portal to leave, but Rune jumps into it too at the last second and is transported along with Thor back to Marvel Earth 616. Now, after exiting the portal, Rune encounters and almost takes the life of Powder Keg by drinking his blood, but doing so gives Rune more power and results in him sensing the Infinity Gems, which is then when he went on a one-minded mission to collect them all, which he actually does before they overpower him and the Soul Stone turns him into a shriveled up husk of flesh. Number 10, Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her entire body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow as well. Her mastery of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to the two little antennae that she has coming out of her head. But it doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals, and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or even dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life wherever she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently, she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts from energy fields, communicate directly with cosmic beings such as eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. I don't want to keep talking about it anymore. Number 9. Hawkeye. Clint Barton is essentially just a regular human man, but despite that, and likely because of his abilities and talents, he is considered a power level 4 according to Nick Fury's intel, whatever that means. Those aforementioned abilities include being a master of archery in the use of regular bows, longbows, compound bows, and crossbows, with basically perfect accuracy, able to fire multiple arrows at a single target in just a few seconds, hitting multiple targets in a few quick strokes, and directly hitting small targets at the greatest of distances. But he now also has near perfect precision with any aimed or thrown weapon. He is at the peak level of human eyesight possible, is in peak athletic human condition with peak strength, endurance, and reflexes. He's an expert acrobat, tactician, and master martial artist, but just listing off his abilities isn't going to give you a proper understanding of how cool Hawkeye is. So what has he done? In Avengers Volume 3 number 14, Hawkeye was cornered by 17 marksmen and took them all down without taking a single life. And in Hawkeye Volume 4 number 1, Clint ran into a wanted criminal in a bar and took him down silently, somehow fracturing his neck with a deck of cards. I don't know. Number 8. Tigra. When Greer Nelson first came on the scene, she was just known as the Cat, and was given powers tied to her costume. But that all changed when she became Tigra, or Tigra, however you want to pronounce it. Mutating into a human-tiger hybrid in a ritual that bound her to the quote cat people, which while it may be a silly name, was a race of humanoid cats who were created in the Middle Ages, so cat people. Now before you laugh at her for looking silly, just know that in her tiger form, Tigra is granted some useful abilities. Her superhuman strength allows her to lift over 10 tons with her leg muscles, allowing her to perform a standing jump of 12 feet. She can run at speeds of around 70 miles per hour, has superhuman durability, agility, reflexes, and stamina, and as we all know, cats have heightened senses and like to knock things off of wherever you carefully place them. And as far as I know, the former is still the same with Tigra, whose senses are about 10 times that of a human's. Tigra's eyesight can sense the infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, allowing her for night vision. She can more easily detect the movements of an opponent. Her hearing is so strong that she can detect a ball of tissue paper being dropped at a distance of 40 feet, just like every other cat, and her sense of smell is so developed she can selectively sort through odors just to track someone. Number 7. Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is one of, if not the greatest martial artist on Earth. He was trained from birth to become the ultimate warrior. He can take on multiple opponents at once and can even defeat people much more superhumanly powerful than he is. In fact, in the White Hot Room, when the Phoenix organized a tournament to pick who would be the new host, the only reason that Shang-Chi lost was because he refused to take someone's life, having him expelled from that tournament. He is particularly skilled in Chinese martial arts, but his skill branches out to many other forms of martial arts as well. In one case, he even worked with Spider-Man to create a new martial art based on Peter's powers. Shang-Chi also is able to manipulate Chi energy, which he can use to enhance his strength and durability, and can even detect others based on their energy, like he did when he detected a psionically masked Jean Grey. But Shang-Chi gets a much more significant boost of power when he's using the 10 rings. He can use those rings as projectiles, manipulate their size, and use them them to levitate or even fly. The rings grant the martial master superhuman strength, durability, speed, and stamina, and he can even manipulate the energies from the rings to do many other things as well. And then, just to top it all off, thanks to the other side of his heritage, Shang-Chi inherited his mother's psionic abilities to communicate with his blood relatives, even the deceased ones. Freaky. Number 6. Jack of Hearts. Jonathan Hart is a hero you may not have heard of, or maybe you have, I don't know. What I do know is that Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist, a scientist that created the ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid. In a tragic comic book backstory, that fluid was exposed to Jack and it gave him his awesome but difficult to control abilities. Importantly, he was also part alien, with his mother hailing from the Contraxian race. Now, due to his cellular mutation that took place after his Zero Fluid exposure, Jonathan Hart is now able to produce pink concussive energy beams and blasts from his hands and body, taking up the incredibly clever name of Jack of Hearts. Jack of Hearts can use his zero energy blast to fly at speeds currently not specifically known, but he has flown halfway across the United States in 3 minutes flat, which is pretty fast. His biological structure was reformed to basically give him the superhuman starter pack abilities, but his strength has been able to lift 25 tons. He has enhanced speed, stamina, healing factor, and durability, able to withstand some pretty heavy hits and survive in the vacuum of space. He also went through another mutation which gave him the ability to think as fast as a computer can, which is really cool, and he can retain and retrieve stored information from deep recesses of his brain, which is also really cool. Number 5. Blue Marvel. Adam Brashear, a former Marine and scientist turned superhero, stands as one of Marvel Comics' most formidable heavyweights. Not only does he have immense physical strength, but he also ranks among the most brilliant minds in the Marvel Universe. He's an underutilized character who happens to be one of my personal favorites. His origin story unfolds in the tumultuous 1960s amid a groundbreaking project centered on utilizing antimatter as an energy source. However, an unforeseen explosion during the experiment forever changed Adam and his close friend, Connor. The cataclysmic event transformed Adam into a living, stable antimatter reactor, giving him extraordinary superhuman abilities. Embracing his powers, he assumed the mantle of the Blue Marvel, a masked hero dedicated to safeguarding the world, but tragically, Connor's fate took a darker turn as he became Anti-Man, a villain. Their epic clashes reached a climax during one unforgettable battle when the Blue Marvel's mask was torn away, revealing his identity as an African-American hero. In the racially charged climate of the 1960s America, President John F. Kennedy urged him to retire prematurely to alleviate tensions. It wasn't until decades later that he came back as a full-on superhero and kicked some serious butt in the Avengers. Number 4. Sersi. Sersi is a member of the Eternals, an evolutionary offshoot of humanity gifted with amazing powers and abilities to look after the human race through the ages, which is similar but also just a smidgen bit different from the Eternals' movie counterparts. As an Eternal, Sersi's body is augmented by cosmic energy and she has total mental control over her entire molecular structure, which allows her and other Eternals to be immortal, indestructible, and invulnerable to pretty much anything. Sersi has enough strength to bench 20 tons, but thanks to her telekinesis, she can augment that to lift about 25 tons. She can also fly at around 760 miles per hour, which is, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty dang fast. She can project cosmic energy, has telepathy that allows her to hypnotize weak-minded fools, but she can also teleport, but she hates it, and she is even able to project images from her mind, which is such a cool idea for an ability. Those are all the powers that we don't see in the Eternals movie, because arguably the ability she has the most talent in is her matter transmutation ability, which allows Sersi to transmute nearly any item or being into almost whatever she wants them to be. Among the Eternals, she has the highest ranking of power with this ability, and it allows her to self-heal any injury she does actually sustain, which aren't many because she's awesome. Number 3. Luke Cage. Criminal turned unstoppable superhero is quite the feat, but Luke Cage handles that with grace, becoming a pillar of his community and even eventually becoming mayor of New York itself. Whenever I think of Luke Cage, the word unstoppable is what actually comes to mind. I just think of him as this big brick wall just standing in the way of anyone who would try to harm anyone else. Luke went through a super soldier experiment known as the Burstein process, which increased his cellular regeneration rate. This means that Luke was given a level of super strength that, with training and experience, has made him strong enough to lift 50 tons. But there have been times where he's exceeded that, and this strength lets him perform thunderclaps, leap incredible distances, and he's been able to grab onto the back of an aeroplane and force it to come to a complete stop. That is nuts. Alongside his strength, he was obviously given superhuman stamina to match with that, but most know him for his nigh invulnerability. Luke's skin, muscles, and bone tissue are about as hard as titanium steel, making him basically immune to bullets and blades. He can withstand hits of around 1 ton and blasts of 150 pounds of TNT, but those numbers wax and wane depending on the story. He has taken hits from people far stronger than himself and survived falls from 90 stories up. If Peter Parker is the heart of New York, Luke Cage is basically like the wall. Number 2. Wasp. Traditionally, the Wasp has been considered one of the less powerful members of the Avengers. Her unique abilities, which include shrinking, flight, and emitting energy blasts through her Wasp sting, are undeniably formidable, yet individually they might be classified as street-level powers. In the presence of iconic figures like Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, few anticipated that the Wasp would rise to prominence within the team's ranks. However, the Wasp defied those expectations in remarkable fashion. She achieved the distinction of becoming the first woman to lead the Avengers ever, a feat that astonished her teammates and fans alike. Her years of experience endowed her with wisdom and capabilities that far exceed the sum of her individual powers. The Wasp's mastery of her abilities, coupled with her intelligence and resourcefulness, transformed her into a formidable hero who surpassed the expectations of everyone who had ever underestimated her. And finally, in at number 1 today is Protector. Novar, also known as the Protector, is an extraterrestrial figure who carries a bit of a renegade reputation. In a remarkable display of his power, he once took down both Thor and Captain Marvel simultaneously, an impressive feat by any measure. However, it's worth noting that many readers may not be familiar with the character of the Protector, as Novar has gained more substantial recognition among fans as Marvel Boy, particularly through his involvement with the Young Avengers. Hailing from Earth 200080 as a Kree super soldier, Novar has since laid claim to the vast universe of Earth 616 as his own. His unique set of powers include, and I'm not joking, explosive fingernails, psychedelic saliva, wall-crawling abilities, heightened senses, and a remarkable conscious control over various bodily functions, among other powers. Novar's prowess in combat is truly formidable, a trait that certainly captured the attention of his teammate turned lover, Hercules. In shedding his Avengers affiliation and the Protector moniker, Novar has found his true calling and thrived as a member of the Young Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, and has even transitioned into the role of an interstellar diplomat and a Guardian of the Galaxy.
Number 10. Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such, a lot of people do not take Dupe seriously at all, which also extends to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and depiction. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and honestly, so much more. I think perhaps this is the reason, in fact, that he doesn't appear as often in the comics, and therefore isn't as appreciated for his powers by fans. He's just too crazy. He's just too powerful. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when we talk about X-Men, I know I love it, be sure that you click that subscribe button, ring that bell so you do not miss out whenever we are talking about all the X-Men goodness. Number 9. Tempest. Tempest could literally undo anyone in the blink of an eye, like she did with Matthew Malloy, who was set up to be pretty much the most powerful mutant in almost all of existence, I would say. His reality bending was honestly off the charts, and yet Tempest was able to defeat him by traveling back in time to make sure his parents never met. Ho-ho. Her ability allows her to create time bubbles in which she can control the flow of time. Her powers earned her a place on Krakoa's Five, a team created for the purpose of handling all mutant resurrections. She can slow or speed up time as much as she wants within the bubbles, and can also use her chronokinesis powers to time travel. Number 8. Juggernaut. Juggernaut, a well-known X-Men antagonist, is widely regarded as one of the most powerful characters in the comics. Even though he is not a mutant, he became a member of the X-Men team after losing most of his abilities due to a dispute with Sidorak and seeking reconciliation with his stepbrother Charles Xavier. Interestingly, Juggernaut managed to form many friendships during his time with the X-Men. When I say that Juggy is underrated, I don't necessarily mean as a powerful character. I think we all know how powerful and dangerous Juggernaut can be. I personally would not want to face him, that is for sure, but when it comes to him as a member of the X-Men, I feel like this is often overlooked and that overall he's a somewhat underrated member of the team in terms of what he brings to it. And I don't just mean in terms of his powers. Number 7, Beast. Beast is underrated on, honestly, a lot of levels, whether we're talking about classic Beast or current Beast, but especially I feel with the current Beast that we have, that guy is downright deadly. Not only was he unable to be reined in by Wolverine, who ultimately ended up killing Beast after Beast had him become his lapdog to be sent out on some of the darkest missions of X-Force, reducing Wolverine to a mere tool used for wiping out perceived threats to Krakoa, but he also perhaps has become even more dangerous after being resurrected. Now we have multiple Beast clones who themselves are working on their own small army of Wolverine clones with the project known as Weapons of X. Number 6, Sync. Sync is only now starting to be fully appreciated by fans around the world, all thanks to his reappearance in the Krakoa era. Sync was one of the people prioritized for resurrection, as he was needed to go on a mission into the Vault where the Children of the Vault had retreated. Considering them and their evolution a threat, the Quiet Council put together a small away team to investigate what was happening inside the Vault, sending them out to basically infiltrate it. This is just what Sync, Darwin, and Laura Kinney, then known as Wolverine, currently known as Talon in the comics, were tasked to do. It's here that we got to bask in Sync's rainbow colors, saw the relationship develop between Everett himself and Laura, and where we learned that it might be possible for Sync to even sync with others who were not mutants. We'd also learn in the X-Men series that Sync had evolved to a point that he could remain synced with his fellow mutants even when outside of their range, making Sync possibly one of the most powerful mutants to just have ever existed. Number 5, Banshee. Banshee, simply put, isn't a hero we focused on here on Top 10 Nerd. I can't remember the last time I featured him on a list, and yet he kicks butt consistently in the comics. Banshee's mutant powers turn him into a siren, which oddly enough is the name for his daughter, who shares his abilities, the name that she took up for herself as an active mutant hero. Banshee can use his powers to attack his opponents, fly, see in the dark with sonar abilities, influence and persuade his opponents, and even create shields, all with the use of his amazing voice. Basically, he's like a smaller scale Black Bolt, which means that while Black Bolt, the Inhuman King, gets a ton of love in the comics and outside, other Sonic-based heroes like Banshees, Sean Cassidy tend to fall by the wayside, sadly. Number 4, Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality 13729. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm and of T'Challa, that she is a skilled combatant as well, as while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she's also an extremely skilled fighter as well, and her dad would obviously be a given inspiration for her as a fighter. Black Panther is well known for his fighting prowess. Chimera may have hailed from Earth 13729, where she was a member of the X-Men, but after being displaced to Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, she also became a member of the X-Men there as well. Number 3, Angel/Archangel. Warren Worthington III is not usually folks' first pick for mutants who are their favorite among those who have belonged to the X-Men team, but it is important, I think, to acknowledge Warren's history with the mutants and consider the fact that he is a legacy member of the X-Men. Warren joined up with the very first roster of the X-Men team to have ever existed, being one of the first members to be brought together by Charles Xavier. Sure, he might have hollow bones and his powers may mostly involve just flight, but when it comes to flying, Warren has proven in the past that he is one of the best, and in his Archangel form, he is even more powerful. He is also one of the most useful mutants outside of his power set, being an extremely accomplished businessman who tends to be one of the most charismatic members of the X-Men, who since his early days has been popular with the public, helping the team's image.
Number 2, DC Bombshells. DC Comics Bombshells is an awesome story from 2015 that focuses on a reality where a team of female superheroes fight on the side of the Allies during World War II. It actually first came to be because of a line of statuettes released by DC with superheroines wearing retro 40s inspired costumes. They were so popular that they moved to variant covers and then they got their own series. Each hero has their own style and story while still all being part of this bigger, wider alternate World War II story. It's truly awesome and mainly follows Batwoman, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Stargirl, Zatanna, and the Batgirls. Go give it a little gander, would you? Number 1, Dark Knights of Steel. And now for my favorite. Dark Knights of Steel. swords, sorcery, superheroes. Dark Knights of Steel is a story that actually came out this year, that's 2022 if you're watching this from the future, but is set in an alternate medieval fantasy universe. Batman is an actual knight and half Kryptonian. Like, I'm just in love. Okay, so basically, Jor-El and Lara escape Krypton before it is destroyed and crash land on the medieval Earth, and eventually become the rulers of the land after giving birth to Kal-El. It's wild. There are alternate versions of Green Lantern, Supergirl, Harley Quinn, Robins, Alfred, Constantine, Green Arrow, Joker, Green Lantern, Black Lightning, and more. I love to see comic book publishers do these time-displaced stories, it's great.
Number 10, Ultimate Red Skull. Ultimate Red Skull is not a hero, but hey, guess what? This isn't a superhero list, it's a character list. So it's still super appropriate for me to be including him here. Why do we love him? Because he is a complex villain with an insane backstory and origin. Ultimate Red Skull is called such because he hails from the ultimate reality of Earth 1610, with its own comic line that literally saved Marvel back in the early 2000s, breathing new and fresh lifeblood into the company by getting people excited to read comics again. Many characters as such were changed, as this line was basically free from the normal bogged down 616 continuity, which for some was actually intimidating to dip into because of years and years of previous continuity. I know myself, when I started reading comics, I was also intimidated. Ultimate Red Skull is one of these characters that was completely revamped. In this version of the tale, he is actually Steve Rogers' son, being the son of both Captain America and his fiancée at the time, Gail Richards. After Steven went MIA while on a mission, becoming frozen in the ice, Gail was convinced to give up their baby to the American government for the child's protection, or so she was told. In reality, the US military simply wanted to train the boy to be like his father, hoping to acquire another super soldier after the loss of Rogers. However, this backfired, as the boy became resentful of his absent father and his accomplishments, as well as those who were holding him, and escaped, becoming the villain known as Red Skull. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love characters that are just underappreciated like I do, be sure to check out our weirdest playlist, because I feel like weird characters are often also that. Number 9, Young Cable. Young Cable! I mean, I love all forms of Cable really, but Young Cable or Kid Cable is definitely one of my favorite versions. And while Cable is back, Young Cable basically swapped out spots with him for this to be so. Kind of breaks my heart, because this happened after I was really beginning to fall in love with the character via Phil Noto and Jerry Dugan's Cable series. I haven't talked about this series in some time, but it truly was one of my favorites from the current X-Men line. And if Young Cable isn't enough to pique your interest, it also has Space Knights and the Stepford Cuckoos peppered throughout as well, and just good old Summers family bonding, which we all enjoy. So there is definitely something in there that I'm sure would draw you in, and then of course, like me, you'll probably also fall in love with the character. This might be a controversial one to include though, considering many were not a fan of the character when he first arrived on the scene, seemingly closing his own time loop by killing his older self, which is, you know, why a lot of fans are not here for Kid Cable. But trust me when I say this series will make you a fan, and like me, will probably also make you miss him, like me wanting to have him back in the comics sooner rather than later, but probably will have to wait for some time. Number 8, Trinary. Trinary is another hero that I love who recently fell by the wayside in the comics, and I was really enjoying reading X-Corp too, which I wanted it to be an ongoing, but it was only a mini. Why'd this happen? The team and series that Trinary was a part of. Shilpa Khatri is a relatively new character over at Marvel who first appeared in 2018 in X-Men Red issue number 1. She is a mutant whose powers allow her to control technology. Although, to hear Trinary explain it, it's less her bending tech to her will and more like her having a conversation with technology and making requests which are happily carried out. In other words, it seems like her technopathy abilities are more like Cypher's when it comes to technology. She can communicate with the tech, and generally they want to help Trinary because they like her. Shilpa initially gained the attention of the X-Men as a mutant when she used her powers to balance some of the wealth in India, taking from 25 of the highest earning CEOs' bank accounts to basically give funds to every single working woman in the country, which I also personally am like, balancing it out, balancing out the money. Number 7, Moon Girl. Moon Girl is ranking a little lower on this list because although I love Luna and I do think that she deserves more time in the spotlight, having recently been declared officially by Marvel as one of their all-time smartest superheroes. She also did just get a new series, and she even got a show on Disney Plus along with her pal Devil Dinosaur. Luna Lafayette is just an inspiring character, and that's why I still think she deserves a place on our list and deserves even more time in the spotlight. Although she is finally coming back into the spotlight now, there was a long time when she was very much out of it. I'm excited though to see her coming back into the mainstream and to get so much attention. And I want to, in part, thank Marvel Snap possibly for some of what's happening with her now, who also really did her and Devil Dino justice with the cards that they made for both of them in the game. I think both Moon Girl series could even be attracting new readers and viewers thanks to her card in the game, which pairs insanely well with Devil Dinosaur when used correctly. Like, the two of them together in Marvel Snap are really a pretty OP duo. Number 6. Talisman. Talisman is an amazing character, and one, like many Alpha Flight members, that we simply do not get enough of in the comics. She is the daughter of Shaman, Dr. Michael II Youngman, and like many daughters who have come before her and after her in the comics, I feel she has been a little bit snubbed somewhat throughout her history. Like her father, Elizabeth is also a pretty rad character with multiple layers. She has a strained relationship with her father and the death of her mother, which happened when she was young. Both Elizabeth and Michael suffered as a result of her loss, with Elizabeth blaming her father and her father, Michael, also pretty much blaming himself. Despite their strained relationship, however, Elizabeth would eventually reach out to her father, and the mysticism that stretched back through their family history would also be shown to influence her, with her being revealed as the powerful figure Talisman, with her getting much of her power from the coronet, or talisman if you prefer, of power. Number 5. Ultimate Modi. When it comes to the ultimate reality, there are so many amazing characters that deserve more time in the spotlight. One of them is the son of Thor and Hela. Now, before you freak out, a friendly reminder that in the comics, Hela is not Thor's sister, but is his niece. And before you freak out from that revelation, a friendly reminder that in the Ultimate Comics line, Hela's origins are simply that she is basically death personified. So, no direct relation to Thor that we know of, although there is something pretty creepy to be said about their relationship, other than the fact that Thor was manipulated into sleeping with Hela in exchange for basically helping his love Valkyrie. She's had her eyes on him ever since he was really young, which is disturbing. But I guess if, she's death personified, at any point in his life this becomes creepy because, by comparison, she's very ancient. Modi is their son together, and he is interesting in the sense that he likely served somewhat as an inspiration for the MCU version of Loki. Thor even at one point in the comics mistakes him for Loki, not recognizing his son now that he is all grown up, after having left him in the World Tree to basically grow up alone, for Modi's own protection. But of course, Modi wasn't really fixated on that part of the whole leaving him alone to grow up. Modi is interesting because he never really seems to have had a close connection with either of his parents, and we see him probably do the most bonding with his uncle Loki. This might also be why he ends up as more of a villain in the story, although his mom is also Hela, so that may have also had an influence on him. Number 4. Photon. Monica Rambeau is, I feel like, just beginning to get some of her due in modern comics. She recently got her own series titled Photon, and we are finally going to see her on the big screen when she appears in the Marvels, which will be about Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and of course, Monica Rambeau, who I imagine will be known as well in the MCU as Photon. I feel like Monica is a character who has been snubbed consistently throughout her history. She was the first female Captain Marvel who was forced to give up the name when Marvel's son, Genisvel, wanted to use the name for himself, which I guess he is Captain Marvel's son, but still. She was also at one point a leader of the Avengers team, but was pretty quickly nerfed after a team-up attack with Thor backfired, leaving her weak and on the mend. She was then manipulated by the evil Dr. Druid into giving up her place as team leader. Monica is an amazingly powerful character who also really has a strong sense of right and wrong. She is a fantastic character who also has such a rich history and origin, working for the New Orleans Harbor Patrol initially as a lieutenant before a freak accident that happened on duty resulted in her getting powers. Number 3. Quasar. I might be the only one who misses Quasar, but lately, I don't know, I've just been thinking about him a lot, and he is most definitely a character who I think does not get enough love, especially currently in the modern comics. I was even looking up Quasar the other day, and I could only find a recent appearance of him from about 2 years ago in Guardians of the Galaxy. That has been too long, in my opinion. I first fell in love with the character of Wendell Vaughn in the Dazzler series, where he was introduced to me through Project Pegasus, being really one of the few friends Dazzler had after she was intercepted by them and volunteered herself, kind of, and her powers for further study. Eventually, Dazzler would try to leave the facility without being dismissed, becoming suspicious of the scientific minds that were holding her there and basically resentful of them. During her escape, she would accidentally use her powers to seemingly kill the villain Ulysses Claw, who was also being held for study. Through this, Wendell would remain a friend of Dazzler and would even come to testify at her trial when she was forced to face the music and was basically sued by Pegasus for the damage done to Project Pegasus and the apparent accidental murder of Claw, who was in their custody, so yeah. Number 2, Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is one of those characters that I really think deserves so much more attention. He is just such a powerful and interesting figure, and he does not get enough time to shine in the comics. Blue Marvel is Adam Brashear, known for being super smart, super powerful, and kind of super old. Although he doesn't look like it, thanks to his superpowers, of course. Blue Marvel was actually retconned to have been a hero way back in the 60s. He became a hero after the negative reactor experiment he was working on went wrong. He and his scientific team were hoping to bridge the gap between the negative zone and the physical plane in a hope to harness basically antimatter energy. However, the reactor during a test exploded. Did it explode or did it implode? It did one of those things. And combined with Adam, turning him into a living, breathing negative reactor. I don't think he actually has to breathe though, but the fact remains that he became in essence a superhero as a result of this explosion or implosion. He would go on to fight crime in the US, but would basically be asked to step down by the president after being celebrated for his accomplishments thus far, as a result of the intense racial tension in the country at the time. He's got a fascinating past and is an extremely interesting and powerful character, in essence having powers to rival those of basically DC's Superman. So why we don't talk about him more, I don't know. Maybe he's too powerful. Is that the problem? Number 1, Dazzler. For those who are new to the channel, I love Dazzler. And for those of you who have been around for a while, I'm sure Daz taking my top spot comes as a surprise to basically no one. I personally am generally a big fan of the characters who are less well known and seem to kind of just like fly under the radar. I think it's because I've always felt some kinship with them, because although they are great and amazing, they might not be as popular or as celebrated among like all fans. In a way, I think this reflects the way that I kind of see myself. Like, I'm pretty cool, but I also feel like because I enjoy celebrating kind of like my little quirks, I'll never really be someone who is mainstream popular because I don't necessarily like fit into neat boxes. Dazzler's also one of those characters. With someone like Dazzler, it's kind of the same thing that she has going on, both on the page to readers and I would say in canon in her own life. Dazzler is a mutant, but she's never really been super passionate about using her powers like so many others to be your typical hero. Instead, she's more interested in using her powers to entertain and bring joy to people through the power of her music and her live performances. She's like one of those, you know, just everyday heroes. She's like, I just want to entertain people and do that, and in that way, she's heroic, and then she gets pulled into stuff and she's still like, oh dang, I need to like figure this out now, and she always thinks through it, I feel like a real person would.
At number 10, it's kind of obvious, Aquaman. One might overlook the depths of appreciation for Aquaman within the Justice League. Sure, his capability to communicate with marine life might seem pretty niche, but let's reel in the bigger picture. The oceans cover about 70% of our planet, harboring uncharted territories and mysteries. Aquaman isn't just some guy who talks to fish. He's the bridge between those two worlds, a literal middle ground between humanity and the mysterious deep. His trident isn't just a fancy fork, you guys. It controls tides, wields immense power, and symbolizes authority. I mean, just think about it. The Justice League isn't just about battling supervillains, it's also about safeguarding Earth's entire spectrum, both above and below the waves. So perhaps it's finally time we give Aquaman the recognition he deserves for his role as an unsung guardian of not just our cities, but also our oceans. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I really appreciate it. At number 9, Dr. Light. Dr. Light, no, not the villainous one. We're shining a light on Kimiyo Hoshi, the heroic version. During Crisis on Infinite Earths, Hoshi got a cosmic power-up courtesy of the Monitor. But she didn't just twiddle her thumbs after that. Oh no, she actually joined forces with John Kent's League. Fast forward to a mission with Damian Wayne where her true potential ignited. She latched onto her powers like a life buoy in the Sea of Trouble, seizing the Great Darkness's link to the Dark Army. And using her cosmic juju, she was able to keep the wonky multiverse in check, Like, imagine the multiverse like a Jenga tower on a shaky table. That's Dark Crisis for you. But thanks to Dr. Light's intervention, that tower stood up tall. At number 8 is Martian Manhunter. When it comes to the Justice League, we often find ourselves focusing on the big names like the iconic Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, but let's not forget about the underrated gem in the lineup, Mr. Martian Manhunter. John Johns, as he's known on his Mars block, boasts an impressive record. He's been a steadfast member since the League's inception, a fact that might even surprise the most dedicated fans of the superhero world. While he took a brief hiatus to deal with his own rogues gallery in Metropolis, Martian Manhunter proved his mettle when the chips were down. The Dark Army threat called him back into action alongside his super buddies, and there he stood, resolute and ready. In an ultimate showdown, he, like other heroes, met his quote-unquote demise, only to triumph through the chaos, showing us that his place was never in question. John Johns, the shape-shifting, telepathic powerhouse, truly deserves a spotlight among Earth's mightiest heroes. At number 7 is John Constantine. Enter John Constantine, the unassuming yet pivotal member of the Justice League. Nestled within the DC universe, his mastery over the arcane and his sharp wit are his greatest assets. Constantine's recent exploits with the Justice League Dark demonstrates his prowess in thwarting even the most menacing of adversaries. His instrumental role in quelling Merlin's Earth-threatening havoc showcased his resourcefulness. But it's not just about the supernatural. When the cataclysmic onslaught by Pyrrha on the multiverse unraveled, Constantine's significance truly shone. United with the League's unconventional champions, he orchestrated a daring expedition into the Starheart. This voyage unearthed the elusive ties between Pyrrha and the looming Great Darkness, unraveling a truth vital to preserving the cosmos. So without Constantine's calculated audacity, the unraveling of this intricate tapestry might have remained an unrealized endeavor. At number 6 is Detective Chimp. Detective Chimp, a seemingly unconventional member of the Justice League Dark, often flies under the radar. Nestled within DC's magical realm, Detective Chimp's inclusion might appear puzzling at first glance, yet he's a strategic asset with a rich history. Having intertwined with the Shadow Pact, he actively combated the Spectre and assumed leadership. His saga continued as he merged into the JLD, significantly contributing to toppling the enigmatic Upside Down Man. Engagements against mystical adversaries like Merlin and Xanadoth further underscore his prowess. What's remarkable is that Detective Chimp lacks innate magic. His power lies in his encyclopedic insights and deductive prowess. A nonchalant chimp on a couch with a beer might not scream hero, but this tale resonates with the essence of heroism, leveraging what you possess in unexpected ways. At number 5 is Black Canary. DC's trove of superhero houses some major players, yet few shine as brilliantly as Black Canary. Striding confidently in her signature leather jacket and fishnets, she exudes a unique aura. A formidable Justice League member, she's no stranger to clashing with villains like the Royal Flush Gang and Xanadoth. Do any of you nerds remember the Pyrrha incident? Well, it didn't end well, and thanks to Barry Allen, she returned to the fray. At number 4 is Zatanna. DC Comics is a realm brimming with Caped Crusaders and superpowered saviors, and harbors an array of mystical manipulators, none more captivatingly enigmatic than Zatanna. When the formidable Wonder Woman found herself momentarily absent, it was Zatanna who gracefully shouldered the mantle of command, guiding the Justice League Dark. Her pivotal role in orchestrating the League's standoff against the sinister Merlin can't be understated. Amidst all this arcane chaos, she deliberately relinquished control, a calculated gambit that culminated in Merlin's undoing. But this was merely the tip of her metaphysical iceberg. See, Zatanna emerged as a linchpin in the League's conquest against the formidable Xanadoth, locking horns with Pyrrha and his nefarious Dark Army. With unwavering mettle, she has showcased why she deserved the crown of the League's unsung champion. Throughout all of last year, Zatanna became omnipresent, an indomitable force safeguarding the multiverse, and an unsung sentinel shaping destinies with every uttered incantation. At number 3 is Hippolyta. Hippolyta is a formidable Amazonian warrior, proud and strong. Her introduction into the Justice League as a beacon of hope and might was anticipated by many. But alas, the anticipation doesn't always translate into reality. You see, Hippolyta's presence within the League remained akin to a whisper in the tempest, overshadowed by the cosmic machinations of Perpetua and the enigmatic Batman who laughs. But fear not, for every star has its moment moment to gleam. Enter Wonder Woman Historia, a tapestry woven in the loom of imagination. Within its pages, Hippolyta emerges not as a mere figure in the background, but as a central force. We traverse her ancient battles, her defiance against mighty Zeus, and her valiant struggle to emancipate women from their tormentors. In this alternate avenue, Hippolyta illuminates the narrative with deserved radiance, proving that even obscured stars can blaze anew.
Number 2. Batman Nosferatu. If you want something weird in a sort of horror-based and very artistic way, we've got you. Batman Nosferatu was actually part of an Elseworld story series that delve into the German Expressionist period. This story seems to take some inspiration from Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Not only is the art style very different and unique, but the whole tone and the style of the dialogue is as well. The story has a lot going on, but mainly it follows the horrors of Dr. Arkham. To give you like the briefest summary ever, because as I said, there's a lot going on in this story, it's also quite long. The story mainly centers around Dr. Arkham and his experiments and creations, including one called the Laughing Man. Oh, I wonder who that's supposed to be. A reanimated creature made from various corpse parts. In the end, Bruce Wayne's son ends up dying and is resurrected as the Nosferatu, sort of cyborg monster creature who ends up taking on and defeating the Laughing Man. I wonder who Nosferatu is supposed to stand for here. Any guesses? Number 1. Batman/Lobo. Like all of the weirdest comic stories out there across the multiverse, this one also features Lobo. Here, Joker hires the mercenary to ruin Batman's reputation and then finally kill his nemesis. Lobo sets out dressed as Batman and begins to muck up the streets, killing Batman's villains in gruesome ways to make sure that people know that Batman is no hero. He's like, what, does Batman have a no-kill policy? Pfft, not anymore. Also, the deaths have to be gruesome because this is a Lobo comic after all, so yeah, they're all pretty... there's something. I don't even know if we can show them here. In the end, the Joker is forced to call off Lobo after it's revealed that Batman is actually his long-lost twin brother, Bruce Wayne. You see, Joey and Bruce were apparently separated at a young age. I mean, does it get any weirder than this? Number 10. Tales from the Dark Multiverse Batman Hush. I actually really love this story, but it's also kinda out there, especially when you consider it has its own sort of theme song and a very creepy tone. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse Hush, Bruce Wayne is the one who becomes a version of the Hush character. It would be more accurate though to say that he becomes a version of Hush and Batman if they were kinda like combined together. Here, Thomas Elliot instead becomes a rich billionaire playboy and also corrupt senator, allying himself with Talia al Ghul. He manages to make it so that Bruce was locked away in Arkham Asylum. Despite feeling slightly guilty about doing this to his childhood friend, overall Elliot is pretty okay with the way Bruce is imprisoned and treated there. However, after faking his death, Bruce Wayne manages to escape Arkham and becomes Elliot's worst nightmare. And just for a fun fact, he doesn't go by Hush in this one though, he's the Silenced. Shh. Get it? Still like Hush. Number 9. JLA the Nail. This is an Elseworld story that centers around a literal nail. The nail in question is one that punches Martha and Jonathan Kent's tire, thereby preventing them from intercepting and adopting little baby Kal-El, who would grow up to become Superman. Or at least he would have grown up to become Superman if that's what happened. In this world, instead, there is seemingly no Superman. As such, Lex Luthor is successful in making the JLA a band of outlaws. Instead of them being celebrated heroes, they're kind of considered to be somewhat criminal, despite of course their noble intentions. What I will say is at least a lot of this artwork is pretty good. Most of the limited series ends up being kinda dull, save for a few scenes and plot points. The parts that I found the most interesting were one where Selina gets therapy while sexy posing on a desk, another being a fight involving Joker with anti-grav mitts versus Batman, which takes place after Joker has successfully killed Batgirl and Robin. Batman ends up broken as a result of the Joker's actions here. We later learn that the Superman of this universe is basically a very sensitive Jimmy Olsen who is bonded with the remaining traces of Kal-El's DNA found in this crash-landed spaceship. Jimmy doesn't like it when people laugh at him. He ends up in a fight with the real Kal-El, another interesting part of the 3-issue series, who it turns out was adopted by the Amish, hence why he never became a hero, as he preferred to stay within his community. So we get an Amish Superman, and then we also get Jimmy Olsen Superman, but he's pretty much evil. Also, what is that costume he's wearing? Sorry Jimmy, I didn't mean to laugh at you. Sorry. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more multiversal tales, let us know that you love it by giving this video a thumbs up. And also let us know in the comments what other multiversal tales you have loved or you have thought are super weird, or that you loved and thought were weird. I mean, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Number 8. Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods. I don't even know what to really make of this multiversal story. All I can tell you is buckle in, because this dark multiverse story is, yeah, dark. To be fair to this one shot though, I don't really even know what to make of the War of the Gods story in the main continuity, which I also found a little confusing, so it makes sense that this is where I would be as well with the dark multiverse version. A little confused. In this story, the Amazons of Themyscira end up in a war with the United States. When Diana is pulled into a battle with Hecate as a result of these events, where in the main continuity Hecate was defeated by Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, here she just ends up planting a seed within Diana's mind. Diana defeats her, but only temporarily. Following the death of Hippolyta, her mother, Diana is left weak, fearful, alone, and resentful, and this is when Hecate is able to take over. Unable to free her, all of Wonder Woman's friends die trying to. The only way to contain Hecate Wonder Woman is with magic, and many of her magical colleagues actually die in the attempt to do so. Hecate as such ends up chained, but of course so is Diana, unable to find the hope to escape her own internal prison. Of course, like most dark multiversal tales, we end on a pretty dark and tragic note. But that's okay, Zatanna's never gonna give up! Number 7. JLA Act of God. Admittedly, this is a cool premise, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense, which is what's weird about it. In JLA Act of God, an Elseworlds 3-issue miniseries, we get to explore a world where all the heroes of Earth have simultaneously lost their powers. Well, at least almost all of them anyways. How did this happen? Black light? Somehow the world being hit with a flash of black light results in almost everyone losing their powers. I guess normally superheroes like don't go to raves or anything, where black light is, I feel like, very common. Although this is attributed to the black light, some might call it an act of God. A later on, very suddenly, devoutly Christian Diana Prince at least would probably claim that. Diana, haven't you met gods? How does that make sense? What's really ridiculous is in the first issue, as we go through the moment this happened, the world over, we get to see just how diverse not only everyone's powers are, but also when it comes to the source of their powers, just how diverse it is. In one page we go from Steel losing complete control of his systems and suit as he plummets to his doom, to Aquaman losing his ability to connect with the creatures of the sea telepathically and his ability to breathe underwater. At the same time, Kyle Rayner also has lost control of his Green Lantern ring, which seems to now just be, I guess, a really unique and trendy looking accessory. How could a flash of black light affect almost everyone in this same way? Like I said, it's a cool premise, kinda wonky execution though. Like, how is Steel affected by this? Didn't Steel make his suit? I'm confused. Number 6. Facets. What happens when we get to see the Teen Titans as they'd be in a fantasy setting? Well, a whole lot of weirdness. Raven of course ends up evil, known as a deadly and beautiful sorceress, Queen Raven. She creates her own loyal servant and accomplice with Victor Stone, or at least she tries to, transforming him permanently into a cyborg. It turns out this isn't all that Raven's been up to though. She has a whole collection of prisoners whom she has transformed in some way, and when Cyborg refuses to join her, she also contemplates holding him there with the rest of them. So apparently she does this a lot. Seems like her deals with people don't usually work out. I guess she's just hoping that one day that'll change. She's like, I'll just keep doing it. Eventually someone will be loyal to me. If I try it enough times, it's gotta work. In this story, Coriander is a prisoner of some goblin mages who use cosmic energy to transform her into Starfire. The comic features an all-out battle between Raven and Starfire, joined of course by the rest of the Titans. Nightwing goes on a trip inside Phantasm's cloak, literally looks like he's tripping out, and eventually Trigon joins the party when he is summoned by his daughter Raven. You can check it all out in the 1994 New Titans Annual. It's weird. It's definitely weird. Also, some of these outfits are Interesting. Number 5. Superman at Earth's End. I don't even know where to begin with this comic. Oh boy. Okay, so Superman here is one of the first iterations of course, the old man heroes to come that we've come to love so much. See, before there was Old Man Logan, there was Old Man Supes. In this Elseworld story, we are in a post-apocalyptic future where machines rule supreme and mutants basically run amok. Also, there is an army of Batmen and vicious biker gangs because, I mean, why not? The year, I believe, is 2102, so possibly this is what we'll be dealing with in just over 80 years time. Honestly, the way things are going, I could maybe see that being our future. Superman is recharging and recuperating his strength when he hears about the plan to nuke Gotham City. He aims to save the city, but of course without doing any killing, because you know, he's Superman. And of course, no guns, because he's Superman. Except for the part where he uses guns to kill people. Except for that part. Mostly robo and really bad people though, so I guess for Supes it doesn't count. It features the famous "I am a man" memeable moment, which actually was shouted in response to an android, by the way, so out of context it's really weird, but within context it actually like kinda makes some sense. It's still pretty weird, but it's not as weird. Also, shortly after claiming that he doesn't need weapons, Superman chooses to wield a ridiculous megagun known as the Expunger. It's crazy. I just love that he's like, I don't need weapons because I have powers. I would never do that. And then like flip to like 2 pages later and he's like, look at this giant expunger, I'm gonna use this mega gun. Number 4. All-Star Batman and Robin. Not so much a story as a full series, but I have other full series on this list, so it's fine. All-Star Batman and Robin consists of 10 issues, all of which are pretty weird when it comes to the depiction and characterization of a lot of our favorite superheroes, villains, and their allies even. Once again, we get a super jacked version of Joker in this comic. We also get a version of Vicky Vale who seems far more obsessed with Superman's manhood and dates with Bruce Wayne than any kind of serious reporting. And of course, then there are Batman and Robin. What a dynamic. Batman in this comic is the worst kind of hero, an entitled one. This is the version who refers to himself as the goddamn Batman and makes Dick eat rats and sleep in the Batcave initially. Because he's Batman and he can do that. He also torments Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, by painting himself, Robin, and the entire room and corridor yellow, and also serves and consumes yellow food and drink around him, with Batman enjoying some lemonade and Robin devouring what appears to be an all yellow ice cream cone. All-Star Batman and Robin has to be one of the weirdest multiverses out there. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, what is happening? What is this characterization? Number 3. JLA created equal. Okay, so All-Star Batman and Robin is the not so great kind of weird, but JLA created equal is just the weird kind of weird. In this 2-part Elseworld story, we get a glimpse into a world where all the men, or almost all the men, were killed off by an unexpected and sudden plague. The only 2 left alive are Superman and Lex Luthor in this reality, and yet for all the powerful women who remain, this book sure manages to still be about the male characters within it. In Created Equal, Superman attempts to help the rest of the new, almost all-female JLA figure out a way to repopulate the Earth. I say almost because Superman's still there, so yeah. The main concern is how to ensure the survival of the human male gender, as if they made clones, with their technology and resources, they'd actually only be able to produce female ones. I guess they can't like tamper with the genes, they can't like tamper with the DNA, or I don't know how you make clones anyway, so I probably shouldn't tell other people how to do it. Eventually, Lois Lane and Clark Kent end up conceiving a son who is born and named Adam. He accidentally hugs his mother to death, and then Lex, being Lex, unleashes a plan to take control of all the young men who were created and raised on Themyscira, thanks to Adam's existence and his resilience. Also, he makes them all bald, because this is Lex Luthor, so yeah. Oh, what a weird story. Come and join me, and also I'll be bald, because you all have lovely hair and it offends me. Number 2. A Batman Reptilian. Ah yes, the story of an alien baby that belongs to Killer Croc because he was influenced by aliens while inside his mother's womb, which is how he's even mutated and also makes him like, I guess, a hybrid alien-human creation technically. In this beautiful yet bizarre story, Batman is attempting to track down whoever is killing all of his rogues. What he finds out though is that it isn't any one of the other villains, but Croc's baby that he just gave birth to. Killer Croc, of course, didn't know that he could do that. I mean, neither did we. It turns out that this is a result of him being part alien in origin, or being tampered with by aliens when he was like a fetus. The newborn babe, it turns out, just wants its mama, but for what purpose remains to be seen. Killer Croc can't nurture it, as you know, he doesn't have like the biological equipment for that. After we get through that whole slog of that's not gonna work, it's also implied that the giant alien monster baby wants Croc to mate with it, which is also thankfully out of the question when it comes to Croc's willingness, so thank goodness, because I thought this better not be where this is going. Oh my goodness. Did I mention that Batman is also a huge jerk throughout this entire series? Cause yeah, this is Garth Ennis behind the writing wheel, and that is very much a thing. Which I'm not surprised by. That's kind of Ennis' whole thing, so yeah. I actually like Batman being a butt in that story more than I like him being a butt in Frank Miller's All-Star, so yeah. Number 1, Batman Last Night on Earth. This one was where the thumb came from in part 1 of this list. I had intended to actually include this story there, but then I got distracted by the Batman and Lobo crossover. Understandably so, I think, because that's also super weird. But that's fine, because it just means that Last Night on Earth gets a higher spot on this list of bizarre multiversal DC stories. Batman Last Night on Earth is a book that exists outside of the continuity and belongs to the DC Black Label line. Also, Reptilian is part of that same line, just so you know. Black Label primarily is made up of titles that are more adult in terms of their content and their themes. Here, that translates to Batman wearing a straitjacket version of his suit in a post-apocalyptic future, where Joker is just a head in a jar. They also end up fighting giant monster baby Green Lantern constructs in issue number 1, just to give you a sense of the level of weird that we're dealing with here. But it's like a fun weird. It's like a, I'd recommend this weird. I give it 2 weird thumbs up.
At number 10 is Tigra, a superhero who's basically a giant talking cat. I mean, tiger. I mean, personally, I'm a dog person, so it's easy to see why Tigra would be so underestimated. After all, she's hardly the most well-known feline superhero out there. Nevertheless, she's got all the cool feline powers: razor-sharp claws, agility like you wouldn't believe, and a tail that's more than just for show. All pretty generic, but there's one moment in the comics that truly made her stand out. See, Tigra once took down a Skrull who had all the powers of the Fantastic Four combined. Yeah, we're talking about a Skrull with stretchy abilities, fire powers, rock-hard strength, and invisibility. Like, forget the Fantastic Four, this dude was fantastic on his ones. And Tigra, she outsmarted and outpaced this Super Skrull in a face-off. Even when the Skrull had a speed boost from the Human Torch's fire, Tigra showed that she's the real speed demon here. Now, even though Tigra doesn't always hog the spotlight like some of the other big names in the Marvel Universe, she's still an Avenger, so while Tigra might not be on everyone's superhero lunchbox, she's definitely got the skills and the guts to hang out with Earth's mightiest heroes. At number 9 is Sunspot. Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, isn't your typical superhero. Not only does he have the whole rich guy thing going for him, but his powers are seriously cool too. He's basically a human solar panel able to absorb energy and turn it into super strength. Now, the moment when he faced off against the Red Hulk was legendary. I mean, going toe-to-toe with a Hulk takes some serious guts. Sunspot's determination and his solar-powered might were on full display here. He launched a punch so strong, it actually drew blood from the Red Hulk. That's like leaving a dent in a brick wall by punching it. It's basically unheard of. Now, what makes him even cooler is the dude typically holds back from unleashing his full fury. In fact, he barely ever needs to throw punches at all. Sunspot usually relies on his charisma and brains instead of flaunting his powers. But when he does decide to unleash that solar strength, watch out, because there's a lot more to him than just his hefty bank account. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is Reptile. Reptile is a hero with some seriously cool but kind of underrated powers, transforming into dinosaurs. Like, you're in a fight and bam, you can morph into a T-Rex or a raptor, and that's pretty much Reptile's shtick, and it's super awesome. But what's even cooler is that it's gonna take a lot more than a flimsy extinction rock from space to take this dude down. Like, you thought meteors were scary? Try surviving a nuclear blast. Yeah, you heard that right. Apparently, that's where Reptile really shines. At Avengers Arena number 18, this guy survives a direct nuclear explosion. He walks out of it without a scratch, no radiation poisoning, nada. It's not something that just any superhero can boast about. Like, even big shots like Namor were impressed. But handling those dino forms is also quite tricky business. He risks losing control every time he switches into a dinosaur, which adds a hefty dose of risk to his superhero game. So while Reptile might not be headlining Marvel movies or comics, surviving a nuclear blast speaks volumes about his toughness. I mean, turning into dinos might not be as flashy as shooting lasers, let's say, but hey, he's got a serious resilience. Definitely a hero worth giving some more credit to. At number 7 is Speedball. You know, Speedball might not be the first hero that comes to mind when you think of Marvel track stars, but this guy has an incredible story worth talking about. See, back in the day, he was part of the New Warriors, a team that wasn't exactly grabbing the headlines like the Avengers or the X-Men. In fact, his team ended up becoming a bit satirical, with its final incarnation taking the form of a superheroed reality show, which doesn't quite sound so serious. But here's the thing, leading up to Marvel's Civil War, things got super serious for Speedball. His team faced off against this bad guy named Nitro, and let's just say they underestimated him big time, seeing as they may have been a bit more occupied with their show's ratings than actually taking down the bad guy, which was a major mistake. Nitro set off this insane explosion in Stamford that wiped out the entire city and everybody on the scene except for Speedball. Can you imagine? 600 people gone in a blink of an eye, including all of Speedball's superpowered pals. But this guy, his powers that involve bouncing around and soaking up energy, somehow managed to survive. At number 6 is Mimic. This guy's got the wild mutant ability called power mimicry, which means he can copy the abilities of not 1, not 2, but up to 5 different superhumans all at once. It's like having a superpower sampler platter. And it gets even crazier. Mimic isn't limited to just mutant abilities, because he could also mimic non-mutant powers like those of the Fantastic Four. Plus, after hanging out with these superpowered folks for a while, he can consciously switch up and choose which abilities to use on command. In Exiles number 14, Namor the Submariner is on a conquest to claim Latveria, and who steps up? None other than Mimic himself. And these two heavyweights go at it for nearly an hour, and ultimately, Mimic wins. Not only taking down Namor, but a whole army of Doombots all by himself. Some serious superhero muscle right there. As a member of an alternate universe Exiles team from Earth 12, he doesn't nearly get the same recognition as Earth 616 heroes, but it doesn't make him any less powerful. At number 5 is Nova. Sam Alexander is the second incarnation of Nova, taking up after his father after discovering the Nova helmet and using its powers to protect the galaxy. At face value, he sounds kind of generic, especially with his supernova strength and speed, especially since he's overshadowed by his dad so often. But Nova is arguably much more powerful because the kid just can't seem to catch a break. In the final issues of Avengers vs. X-Men, he goes toe-to-toe with Cyclops. And if you think that's impressive, wait till I tell you that Cyclops was imbued with the Phoenix Force. And believe it or not, this kid freaking won. That's like a David and Goliath moment right there. At number 4 is Aurora. Ever heard of Aurora? She's this awesome, super fast hero with some seriously underrated powers. Sure, her twin brother Northstar gets a lot of attention, but Aurora's abilities are top-notch too. In a scene from X-Men number 191, Aurora and Northstar casually destroy X-Mansion, showing off their immense powers. But when Northstar's gotta take a moment to catch his breath, Aurora just doesn't hold back, and goes on the brink of wiping out the whole mutant crew single-handedly. She was a hair away from total domination. Now the thing is, she's got it all, speed, flight, and control over light, yet she's often sidelined compared to her brother. It's like everybody's sleeping on her massive potential. At number 3 is Speed. Speed, also known as Tommy Shepard, might not be on the A-list like Iron Man or Spidey, but he is seriously impressive. You see, Speed isn't just any speedster. He inherited his uncle Quicksilver's velocity, which automatically makes him one of the fastest folks in the Marvel Universe. As one of Scarlet Witch's 2 sons, he often gets overshadowed by his brother Wiccan. Now, obviously, Wiccan's powers are a lot more versatile, given that he does all things magic and Speed just kind of runs fast. But don't get it twisted, Wiccan's magic ain't got nothing on Speed's, well, speed. Why, you ask? Well, you see, Wiccan can teleport. Now, one would think that means he could outpace his brother, and that was put to the test in Young Avengers Presents number 3, where the two brothers raced against each other. Speed did the unbelievable, outpacing his teleporting brother in a race. Imagine that, outrunning somebody who can spontaneously manifest from one spot to another in an instant. That kind of speed is insane. It's moments like these where you wonder why Speed doesn't get more recognition. He's got the speed, the skills, and definitely the power to shake things up in the Marvel world. At number 2 is Tempo. You know, Tempo might not be the first superhero that pops in your mind when you think of Marvel, but trust me, she's one of the most badass time manipulators in the game. She used to hang out with the Mutant Liberation Front, rocking that iconic bullet-headed suit, but things got real interesting when she joined Krakoa. Suddenly, she had a shot at being a part of the X-Men crew, and that's when folks started noticing her. But the moment when Tempo truly proved herself came in in the Marauder series. Until this point, Tempo was only known for slowing or stopping time, but here, she doesn't just stop time, she flips it like a pancake, sending time backwards by billions of years. Yeah, that's right, billions with a B. It's telling me that her first time traveling, she accomplished a feat of such magnitude that most of the time travelers couldn't even dream of. This isn't your average hero, she's like the time traveling wizard of the Marvel Universe. I mean, sure, she might not have the same spotlight as other time travelers like Kang, but Tempo is proving herself to be a powerhouse you definitely don't want to underestimate. At number 1 is Hellion. Imagine facing off against one of the toughest superheroes out there, the Hulk. Yeah, Sunspot isn't the only one who stood up against the giant. Enter this dude. Despite being a young hero, he pulled off something insanely epic. In a comic called World War Hulk X-Men #1, he did the unthinkable. Using his telekinetic powers, he locked the Hulk's fist, giving his team a chance to regroup for battle. Yeah, you heard me right, y'all. A teenager managed to hold back the mighty Hulk's fists with his mind. Now obviously that didn't last forever, but just managing to hold back the strongest force in the multiverse? Come on now, this guy should be a superstar. Now he might not be as famous as some other Marvel heroes, but he's proven he's got some serious skills. Surviving tough situations and facing off against baddies like the Hulk shows he's definitely one to watch in the underrated superhero league.
In at number 10 is Lifeguard. Lifeguard, or Heather Cameron, arguably has one of the most useful mutant powers possible. Her ability is called Danger Detection Response, and basically what it means is that she can detect danger to her or others' lives in her vicinity, and she can literally evolve whatever powers are necessary for her to stop those lives from being lost. She can gain more than one power at a time and is able to control said power after just a few seconds. It also seems to be kind of limitless in what she can do. Her situation biomorphic adaptations have taken the form of growing wings for flight, extra arms for carrying, and super strength, her skin turning into a sort of golden metallic super awesome armor, gills for underwater breathing with her legs even turning into a fishtail for better swimming ability, as well as her simply upping her strength level from normal to superhuman. It's almost too fitting that she was an actual lifeguard before her powers emerged, because she's a literal lifesaver. Number 9, Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow. Her mastery of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to the 2 antennae she has coming out of her head. Right here. She doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life wherever she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts, form energy shields, communicate directly with cosmic beings like eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. All this to say, don't sleep on Mantis. Number 8, Sage. Sage is a super genius with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities specifically allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jumpstarting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system, almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, just like Mantis. Number 7, the Living Swarm. Okay, so there are a few characters out there in comics who can turn into or are made up of things different from you and I. One of the more interesting of those things would be bugs. Characters like Marvel's Swarm, who is made up of a huge number of bees, or Spider-Man and Carl King, who are literally thousands of super spiders who take on the form of a human being. It may be the stuff of nightmares to a lot of us, but the ways in which this ability comes in handy are kind of incredible. Obviously, having a form that can split apart or move to take on different shapes is incredibly useful for getting into places you're not supposed to be, turning yourself into useful items, being basically intangible, or being able to terrify pretty much anyone. But for Carl King and Spider-Man specifically, their consciousness is actually spread throughout the swarm, allowing them to achieve a kind of rudimentary form of possibly immortality, as only one single spider needs to survive for the entire swarm to be remade and just carry on living. Swarm, being made up of thousands of bees, can even fly through the air, and his powers allow him to control other bees to add to his swarm and grow to bigger sizes. The only real issues would come in the form of bug spray and insecticides, but at that point you can't really do much, so there you go. Number 6, cartoon physics. This ability is definitely a unique one, and one not used too often, and for an understandable reason. It is basically unbeatable. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk, Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew from DC Comics, and Deadpool, Impossible Man, and Spider-Ham from Marvel Comics all have some kind of varying degree of this power, not to mention the completely insane character of the Mask. It's hard to explain exactly how this power works or what it even technically is. For someone like Spider-Ham, for example, he's able to become more cartoony the more danger he's in, which kind of lets him and others like him just take a hell of a lot more punishment without being hurt too badly. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk actually just completely warp reality, usually in comical and cartoonish ways. Like I said, it's all hard to properly explain, but these characters can creatively turn almost anything into a weapon. They can eat an ungodly amount of anything, detach their body parts, spin like tornadoes, create traps and allies out of what looks like ink. They can deflate or inflate, they can manipulate the weather based on their emotions, talk to animals, be talking animals, have a great sense of humor, and almost always they break the fourth wall. Actually, being aware of the fact that the character is actually in a comic book is usually a good indication that they have some kind of cartoon physics abilities. And if you really think about it, this ability kind of gives these characters a kind of godhood in comic books. Number 5, living sand. Sand. Yes, it's coarse and it's rough and it does get everywhere, but sand is just millions of tiny rocks, and as such, it can be very strong while also being almost liquid in its composition. Obviously, the obvious choice for examples here would be the Spider-Man villain Sandman, who has been a pain in the backside and occasionally an ally to Spider-Man using these abilities. But there's also the mutant Dust from Marvel Comics as well, who can transform herself into an explosive cloud of sand-like silicon, allowing her to reform her body at will or maintain an aerial-based sand form in the shape of her human body. Clayface from DC Comics is even a character that I think sort of falls into this category, but then we aren't really talking about sand anymore. But if we want to talk manga, there's even Gaara from Naruto, and he'll really show you how powerful sand can be. It's actually kind of scary. Sand can crush, blind, bury, dehydrate, drown, and even erode opponents, which is an absolutely terrifying thought. Number 4, technopathy. Just like the last point, there aren't many characters with this power since it's pretty OP in our modern world. DC's Cyborg and Brainiac, Marvel's Apocalypse, Ultron, or even the mutant Hijack are just a few of the comic book characters who have tapped into the powers of technology, and with it, they were able to bring some of the most powerful heroes and villains to their knees. Technopathy is the ability to psychically perceive and interface with technology, and while the use of the power varies from individual to individual, it allows the user to perceive the location of mechanical devices, physically perceive structure and function of those devices, activate or deactivate power for electronic devices, communicate with and command said electronic devices, and even psychically channel their perception or consciousness through electronic media at will, effectively gaining a sort of pseudo-immortality, just like being a living swarm or being living sand. With the world becoming more and more technologically dependent, this ability just gets more and more useful. Number 3, Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time, but for some reason he always seems kind of unused to me. He's almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond, but not really. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. Like, he can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technology device in his visual range. A skill that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology or create countermeasures for it. It's almost hard to explain how this power is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to actually think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just make it and then deconstruct it later to figure out how to improve it. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take his magical affinity into account. Number 2, stretching. Elasticity and plasticity, the ability to convert the mass of an entire body into a highly malleable state at will, is an ability that has many more applications than you think. This ability is shared by Martian Manhunter using his shapeshifting ability from DC. There's also Plastic Man, and then of course Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, who is probably the best known hero with powers of elasticity. He has been able to use these powers to absorb or redirect the impacts of bullets or explosions, stretch his limbs to distances of 1,500 feet, and for shapeshifting, it's allowed him to do so many different things: entangling, imitating, parachuting, gliding, cushioning, slingshotting, bouncing. He can do all of it, being able to go as thin as a sheet of paper or as narrow as a needle, and even turning himself into a liquid solid state. But it goes even further. He could even mold himself to the shape of something like a key to unlock a door. Basically, this power has a lot of uses. And finally, in at number 1, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy interesting power. Jimmy, or James Madrox, is actually a changeling, which is sort of a genetic precursor to Marvel's mutants, who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of their own. One of the real benefits of this power is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So, let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, or you could have like 20 dupes each read half a book. And then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book that they just read. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use the ability to learn skills. Like, one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was trained as an EMT. One audited an autonomy class for like 6 months. One passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. Stuff like that. In his self-titled comic from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Magi, which is the plural for James's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, but he's just kinda so underrated that I don't think it would happen.
Number 10, Kang the Conqueror. While the future of Kang in the MCU is extremely uncertain, with Jonathan Majors being removed from future projects, the fact remains that in the comics, Kang is an extremely underappreciated villain. This is likely because not as many modern comics fans know how deadly Kang can be. If you are more a fan of the MCU, or if you are more of a modern day comic book collector and reader, you might have missed out on some of Kang's most epic stories and most deadly moves when it comes to him facing the Avengers. Although I will say that comics have been hinting at his power in recent years, if you know where to look. Kang is typically an Avengers villain. While he might look ridiculous on paper, many of us comic book fans know to respect him, as Kang is a master of time who has defeated an insane number of Avengers across the multiverse. I'm not as worried for the character's future in the MCU, because the other cool thing about Kang is that he's a time traveler, and as a result, he has many different looks and identities through the years. So it's possible that he could actually be anyone hiding in disguise, laying in wait for the right moment to reveal himself and strike. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9, the Lizard. The Lizard is a villain who often gets overlooked when it comes to Spider-Man fans. Why is this? Because not many people know just how dark and deadly the Lizard can be. And perhaps because the Lizard's alter ego, Curt Connors, is known for being a good man and a scientist. But that doesn't mean there isn't darkness lurking beneath the surface, even with as well-intentioned a man as Connors. and even without any potential darkness within Connors, the lizard should be dark enough to persuade readers to be intimidated by him and respect him. You also have to think of how terrifying it must be for Connor's consciousness to exist within the lizard when the creature is completely unleashed and fully in control. It's a complete lack of control in a way that is probably super terrifying for Kurt. Number 8. Hunter in the Darkness. The Hunter in the Darkness is an interesting character and one that honestly we do not talk enough about on Top 10 Nerd, and also super complex to be honest. Villain, sometimes a bit of an anti-hero or an ally to heroes. While Wolverine did once free the werewolf-like being from a trap years ago, the Hunter still remained an adversary of Wolverine. It has been implied in the comics that there is a sense of camaraderie between the two at times. When we first met the Hunter in Darkness, it was made to seem like, and in fact some characters in the issue did think, that the Hunter was actually a more feral version of Logan. Number 7. Taskmaster. Everyone knows that Anthony Masters is insane when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. He has photographic reflexes, which allow him to learn any fight move or style just by observing or battling against someone, which makes him pretty hard to beat if you don't have some kind of crazy superpower set. Taskmaster might not be on anyone's A-list, but he sure has fought a ton of well-loved superheroes, including Moon Knight. Moon Knight himself doesn't have any crazy superpowers, but he does have a Batman-like ability to strike fear into the hearts of almost all of his opponents, no matter how skilled they are, which was really the only thing that made it possible for him to defeat Tony here. Number 6. Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and more respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. Look at what Mystique managed to do only a few years ago in X-Men's Inferno, or Chameleon in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as other people, but he also is pretty good at hatching his own plans as well. Number 5. Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly, or at least outwardly, powerful when it comes to what she's capable of and her power set, and for this reason many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why I would advise against that. 2021's Inferno issue number 4. In the Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands. As Mystique so often does. I mean, that's why we love her, right? Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was in fact resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she was almost successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her for so long. Mystique here proves that while her power set may have become OP over the years, it's still really her mind and her sense of cunning that makes her honestly so dangerous. Number 4. Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be a not so real threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world. Or well, even being defeated, he still kind of did. His plan here was to convince everyone he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, I'm still not convinced, he actually still managed to succeed somewhat. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting him to kill the entire X-Men team and School himself. Yikes. Number 3. Destiny. Destiny is one of those villains that is severely underrated. I mean, most people don't even think of her when they think about Marvel villains. Even when they think about X-Men villains, she doesn't happen to be one of the folks that first comes to your mind. And yet she is one of the most powerful out there, despite being very squishy, honestly. Even dead, she is somewhat of a threat in the comics due to her previously recorded premonitions. You see, Destiny is the lover of Mystique, and her mutant power is that she can see into the future. The more likely a future becomes, the more she can see that future, and her visions have often been known to be quite accurate. We don't have a lot of characters who can see into the future, and most of them tend to be on the hero side of things that do have that power, so it's interesting to see a villain with such rarely seen powers, but especially when you consider, her alignment. as a villain. Number 2, Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. You guys know how much I love her. Anytime I do a list like this, she's one of the first people that comes to my mind, and we gotta talk about her. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno story. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, even going on to lead her own X-Men team, nicknamed the Dark X-Men editorially. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and though often forgotten, she really shouldn't be, considering just how dangerous and how powerful she is. Number 1, the Maker. The Maker is the alternate version of Reed Richards. I've always felt that Richards actually might make a better villain than a hero, and the Maker seems to have been this thought made manifest, living proof of it being so. The Maker initially started out as a hero, leader of the team known as the Fantastic Four. However, in the Ultimate Universe where he hails from, the original Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, his and Sue's future of marital bliss was not as guaranteed. And in fact, after the tragedy of Ultimatum and Sue Storm turning down his marriage proposal, Richards got a different perspective on life, which inevitably resulted in him becoming a villain. In this universe, Reed had a rough childhood, and part of where his villainy started was in turning on his own family. A family that had honestly mistreated him for years. Yeah, in this reality, Reed commits patricide and matricide to get back at his parents. And that's just the beginning of his story as a villain. Extremely counter to his Earth 616 alternate.
Coming in at number 10 is The Spot. First appearing in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man number 98 in 1985, as a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Jonathan Owen was assigned to produce the radiation levels of the Vigilante cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. The power used to create said portal caused a blackout, destabilizing it and prompting Owen to step into it and pass out. He awoke floating weightlessly in a dimension that was a place of half darkness and half light that contained a large number of portals, and using the original, he slipped back through to the lab. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him with black spots from head to toe that were portable space warps, and he decided to become muscle for the Kingpin using these powers. He faced Spider-Man and Black Cat, announcing himself as The Spot, causing Spider-Man to fall down laughing. But the potential of his powers not only defeated Spider-Man just once, but could potentially defeat many other heroes, making The Spot someone you may not want to underestimate. Luckily, he's popped up in the recent Carnage comic, but not for very long. Number 9, Moonstone. Carla Sofin was a not-so-moral psychiatrist who particularly enjoyed manipulating her patients into paranoia rather than actually helping them. So we're already off to a really good start here. This led her to be an assistant of the villain Dr. Faustus, and her manipulative skills only grew under his teachings. This allowed her to get time with Lloyd Bloch, the original Moonstone. She gave Lloyd hallucinogens and persuaded him into giving her the Moonstone and the Kree device that granted him his immense powers, which included 10-ton superhuman strength, super speed, stamina, durability, agility, reflexes, and flight, as well as, thanks to the Gravity Stone, the ability to control gravitational forces, enabling her to move and otherwise manipulate matter, to create force fields, to increase gravity around a target and crush it, to generate miniature black holes, and even to transport objects through dimensional rifts. Now, she's been featured in some big villain teams and moments, but I don't think she's ever really had her own time to shine as a solo villain in a real, tangible way. Number 8, Sin. Sin, aka Cynthia Schmidt, is the daughter of the Red Skull, and as such, she's often overshadowed by her pops. But for a little while, she was actually really cool with tons of potential. She was conceived with the intention of Red Skull gaining a male heir, but obviously, Cynthia is not male, and it almost meant her end if it wasn't for Susan Scarborough, who convinced the Skull to let her raise the child in his place. Eventually, Skull returned and used a machine to both age up Cynthia, but also to grant her superpowers. She was eventually captured and rehabilitated by S.H.I.E.L.D., but that was promptly undone by the henchman Crossbones, and the two of them went on the warpath, resulting in the demise of Steve Rogers, Captain America. Yes, Sin was instrumental in the legit fall of her father's greatest rival. But everything returns to the status quo, so Steve did eventually return and Sin was defeated. Despite all that happening though, she went on to gain control of a mystical Asgardian hammer that transformed her into the incredibly powerful Scotty, which was like the main inciting incident for the Fear Itself storyline. mine. She's a really cool villain and one that needs more time in the limelight. I almost prefer her to her father, as much of a sin as that is to say, no pun intended. She just feels even more ruthless and convincing. I want more sin. It's a weird thing to say. Number 7, Killer Moth. Killer Moth, unlike a lot of the characters on this list, isn't really that powerful. But that's not what makes them underrated and in need of more attention. Killer Moth is just fun. Drury Walker first appeared all the way back in Batman number 63 from February 1951, and his whole shtick is just goofy. While other characters have taken their inspiration from having similar backstories to the Batman, the Killer Moth wanted to be the criminal's version of Batman, so he got himself a moth signal and a mothmobile and the name of Killer Moth. Scary. He even set up a false identity as millionaire philanthropist Cameron Van Cleer. In this form, he became friends with Bruce Wayne, which is interesting. I doubt he knew about Bruce's hobby of Bat cosplay, but meanwhile, he promoted himself to Gotham's criminals using his identity as Killer Moth, giving them each an infrared moth signal to call him to their aid. He didn't really fight for them. Instead, he kind of became the distraction for the authorities so that the real criminals could get away. Do you see why he didn't really become so popular? It's just so hilarious, and although his character has evolved a bit since then, no one has really taken him that seriously, so just like Kite Man, he kinda needs his time to just shine and blossom like a flower. Number 6, Lifeform. Lifeform is weird, I'll give you that, but he deserves so much more attention. The son of a right-wing libertarian, George Prufrock was trained by his father to prepare him for the world. Now, although he wanted to be an actor, his father's training saw George convinced to become a scientist instead, eventually landing a role at Advanced Idea Mechanics. Unfortunately, this meant George was exposed to the pro-gamma virus. This virus mutated George into this grotesque monster with superhuman strength, durability, a healing factor, and he can survive in water and the vacuum of space. But he's literally a mutated monster. Now, as Lifeform, he ended up coming face to face with the Punisher, but also sending Frank running away in fear because his weapons had no effect on Lifeform. Eventually, Frank defeated Lifeform, pushing him into a river, but George came back. Now, with two personalities, one his normal peaceful self and the other being the monster. George now came into conflict with Daredevil, but this time he was more of a confused monster, and eventually, in an altercation with the police, his heart began beating so fast that he collapsed and then dissolved into a puddle. When he reformed, this time he was put into battle against the Hulk by the alien Mercy, who also turned him back into an actual man again. But this wouldn't last, as he remutated and attacked an entire hospital. Eventually, this led to the Silver Surfer taking George to a dead planet destroyed by Galactus and just leaving him there, as he couldn't bring himself to put an end to this dual personality monstrosity. And that's the last we ever saw of Lifeform, and I need to know more. Number 5, Wrath. A young, successful, and secretly entirely evil CEO, Wrath is capable of being both Batman and Bruce Wayne's #1 nemesis and antithesis, and yet almost no one cares about him or even knows about him. Wrath first appeared back in 1984 as basically an anti-Batman, and while that may sound like lazy writing and may make you think he won't be popular, he did it before the major villain Prometheus even ever conceived of the idea. Wrath's parents were two burglars who were accidentally taken from this plane of existence by a young police officer who stumbled on them and thought they were robbing their own house. As you can imagine, this is quite the villain backstory to turn a young Wrath completely against law enforcement. He then decided his whole existence to go against them. Wrath even ended up training a young ward of his own named Elliot Caldwell, who you might have guessed became his version of Robin. Caldwell eventually takes on the role of Wrath himself, filling in his mentor's shoes, and he remained as the villain after the New 52 reboot. And yet, Wrath is nowhere to be seen, and you basically never hear from him. Number 4, Spy Master. While other underrated villains end up going into the direction of being ridiculous or really boring, Ted Calloway, also known as Spy Master, is just plain awesome, which makes me wonder why the hell he doesn't really get more attention. He has been a thorn in the side of Tony Stark Iron Man for quite a while, and a big thorn at that, breaking into Stark Tower multiple times. In one arc, he was the one who put together a team of other underutilized Iron Man villains and broke into Stark Tower, stealing some of Stark's tech. He was even able to steal tech for Justin Hammer, which was the spark for the awesome Armor Wars storyline. He has eluded capture multiple times and even let the world believe he was passed away while he continued to operate in the shadows. Despite first appearing in 1971, he's just always remained relatively unknown to the common audience member, and I think that's gotta change. Number 3. Manchester Black. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way is an incredibly good comic book that sees the arrival of a group of anti-heroes called the Elite that fight crime but in an incredibly brutal way. They cause massive accidents and cause the passing of a lot of innocents while still ultimately saving the day. They take the easy road to fighting crime, and this flies directly in the face of the moralities of one little hero called Superman. The leader of this band of villainous heroes goes by the name Manchester Black, and he has access to an incredible level of telekinesis and telepathy. He was able to punch a hole in mountains, but could also pinch the blood vessels in Superman's brain in order to give the hero the equivalent of a stroke. And with his telepathy, he could combat Martian Manhunter, control a group of elite superheroes, and could manipulate the mind of Superman. He is incredibly capable. But in the story he premiered in, he was defeated rather quickly when Superman partially lobotomized him. And even though he got his powers back and has caused a little trouble here and there, I feel as though this villain should have way more time in front of the spotlight.
Number 2. Neil Tapper. This all goes down in issue 6 of Captain America, or part 6 of the Out of Time storyline. So Neil Tapper, right, he was an agent at S.H.I.E.L.D. who had a fling going on with Sharon Carter. Then they split up and Sharon went missing in Philadelphia during a mission to find Jack Monroe. Yeah, this is the same Jack Monroe that I said up there. It's got a lot of layers to it. So Neil Tapper and Nick Fury weren't getting along at this point. Neil thought that Nick wasn't doing a good job with handling Carter's disappearance, and then Fury, being Fury, gave him a stern talk, and then he joined in on the search in Philadelphia. So Sharon was found by Cap. She was with a group of bad guys, which there was also a bomb involved there. So Neil tried to deactivate the bomb, but it went off anyways. This whole bomb, this Bucky bomb thing, it's like no matter where you go, this guy's gonna be the cause of your death. And number 1, President JFK. Why, of course this should be number 1. So in the Days Gone By storyline, the end of Volume 5 of Captain America, he recalls those Winter Soldier years as the dark days, a time where there were no birthdays, just a lot of death and killing. Too much to ever forget, is what he says. Now, amongst those that he took out, it was suggested that he took out the 35th President of the United States, which is a pretty big name to go for. So the Soviets send their top ghost assassin to disrupt global politics. Even in the MCU, this is the same. Even the actor that plays Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, has said in an interview how much Steve can forget Bucky, mentioning that Steve was cool with the fact that Soviets have had his best friend brainwashed and then forced to take out the president. He's like, yeah, it's cool. It wasn't really him. He was just kind of, backseat. He actually returned as a zombie amongst other zombified US presidents, which is just insane, the fact that they do this in comics. I don't think we'll be getting that what if episode with the zombie stuff. I don't think JFK is going to come back in the zombie episode that they're bringing. Because if they do, I think they would get canceled pretty quick. I don't know.